Chapter 1995. For tadpole-like runes that looked like yin and yang fish emitted different lights. Red gears, yellow lightning, green leaves, and a white blood flower that was exactly the same as the light on Magni's body. As the light bloomed, the mechanism of the door started to activate. It was very metaphysical. Duque muttered. I wonder if the encryption method requires our quantum satellite? Everyone followed the diamond St. Magni in, and immediately saw his old friend Orgarin. Although Duque could clearly see the label on his retina that this was not his real body but his echo, there was not much difference. This was Orgaron's will projected from an unknown corner of the universe. It's you guys again. Orgarin himself was a human figure that seemed to be formed from constellation lines and starlight. His expression was a little hazy, but it did not prevent everyone from seeing his expression, as if he had just eaten a mouthful of hot shit. How could he be happy? Back then, it was this group of mortals who surrounded him and gave him a good beating. Only then did he send out a signal that this world was good, and he didn't need to reset it. Who would have thought that the Azeroth Star Soul was also requested by the Titan who hadn't fully matured yet, and it was this group of little bastards. It would be strange if he was not angry. He was about to explode and lecture them. Duque spread his hands. Yo, Orgarin, it's been a long time. Oh, you're in Orion Alpha? Do you want me to open a portal to visit you now? It's very convenient. If Orgarin had a tongue, he would have bitten his own tongue. It was not easy for him to escape from this group of gods of plagues. Who knew that these gods of plagues were now so strong that no one could control them? With just one sense, he knew that Duque and the others had become stronger. Alright, he could not beat Duque and the others back then, and he could not beat them now. This was the tragedy of the Titan's creation. Basically, the upper limit of his strength was locked. Then he immediately realized something was wrong. He looked up in shock. When he spread his senses beyond the Azeroth atmosphere, he saw the third and fourth moon, and a series of neatly arranged satellites, hovering in the orbit of planet Azeroth. Orgaron was terrified. Although he looked serious and majestic on the surface, he was actually afraid and said, Ahem, you have your mission, and I have my duty. Let's get down to business. After exchanging some pleasantries, Orgaron opened his mouth and said, It's because of you cheaters, shameless bastards that we weren't able to come this far. Otherwise, why would our boss Titan not be able to live to this day after creating so many things? Oh, you must be joking. The above was purely Duze's own translation. Orgaron's original words were a very official version of the story. I really didn't expect you to develop to such an extent. Perhaps this is your flaw. Back then, the Titans gave you free will, allowing you to surpass the laws of the universe and survive. Normally, under the siege of the Burning Legion and the ancient gods, the calculated probability of your survival is infinitely close to zero. In the face of such a powerful enemy, even the most powerful of Titan's creations could not escape. Yet, you were able to survive and develop such a magnificent civilization. With such an alliance, we can tell you this planet and the ultimate secret of the Pantheon without any worries. This was the main point. Do you know why the Burning Legion attacked Azeroth? That's because the key to destroying the Burning Legion is in Azeroth, the Pillar of Creation. The Pillar of Creation. The mortal heroes were all dumbfounded. The name itself sounded like a high-end, grand, and high-class item. The Pillar of Creation is actually just a name. It is the divine weapon that the Titans used to create the world, and it is the key to fighting against the Burning Legion. These divine weapons are called the Pillars of Creation in Azeroth, and they have been obtained by people a long time ago. At this point, Orgaron looked at Duque. Duke Marcus, you should be familiar with these things, right? I can sense the aura of one of the Pillar of Creation on you. Duque acted out what it meant to be dazed for a moment. Then, as if he had just woken up from a dream, he lost it. Wait, are you talking about the Tear of Elun? Duque raised his hand, and a diamond-shaped red crystal-like object appeared in his right palm. It emitted a gentle wave of divine power. Everyone's jaw dropped. In Duque's harem chat group, there was an uproar. Wait, wasn't this kept by Isra all this time? When did you get it? Tyrant cried out on the spot. Ever since the cataclysm, I asked Isra to come. Alun didn't object either. With this, I have a deeper understanding of the power of the gods. Duque pretended to be casual. No wonder you used such a short time to train from the demigod level to the peak of demigod level. Queen Sylvie suddenly realized. No, you're thinking too much. Ah. It's so cool to be the first mortal to become a demigod, to be able to occupy the most powerful divine weapon in Azeroth. Jaina was a little envious. No, I'm just occupying the most powerful harem in Azeroth. On the other side, Orgarin continued his explanation. There are 4 other pillars of creation-level divine weapons. They are Shield of Agrama, Tidalstone, Hammer of Khazgaroth, and Eye of Amonthul. I'm not sure of their exact location, but I can tell you that I'm 100% sure that they are in Azeroth. Go. Heroes of the mortal world, do your best to resist the Burning Legion. When you gather all 5 pillars, you will be able to launch a counterattack. Don't be afraid, and don't be discouraged. The Guardians of Azeroth will cooperate fully with you. I have already received a weak summon from the Pantheon. The signal is too weak, and I can't be sure. Perhaps, on the day of the final battle, you will receive help from the Pantheon. Do your best. Mortals, according to your calculation method, you still have 360 days. After saying that, Orgaron's figure slowly faded into the void and disappeared without a trace. Just as all the big shots of the Alliance were still in shock, Duque let out a long sigh of relief. It was finally done. This was the last piece of the puzzle against the Burning Legion. That's right. The arrival of the Legion at this time was also the most glorious moment of the entire Azeroth. Capable people were everywhere, and heroes were everywhere. When Odin, the boss of Odor, and the lords of the Pantheon arrived, this great era would officially begin. Chapter 1996. This was an era where divine weapons could be found everywhere. To put it in an exaggerated way, killing a pig in the enemy's lair in a random game could yield a divine weapon. Of course, that was just for show. To truly unleash the power of a divine weapon, it had to be recharged. A divine weapon that had not been recharged and had the power of the engravings was just a pile of scrap metal. At most, it looked better. Well, but to a salted fish, even a useless divine weapon was still a divine weapon. He could brag about it for the rest of his life, and pass it down to his descendants as a family heirloom. Ah, your grandfather. Back then, there were a bunch of divine weapons. Look, the door panel of our house was made of the divine weapon tower shield. Divine weapons were the ultimate glory of an era, and also the greatest symbol of an era. Some might say that if divine weapons were common, would they still be divine weapons? Duque wanted to say, yes. Even if they were common, a divine weapon was still a divine weapon. Without these divine weapons, the mortals of Azeroth would not have the power to fight against hundreds of millions of demons, especially the elite demons. For normal demons, Duque relied on the technology tree in the Alliance to use all kinds of mass-produced black technology to make up for this disadvantage. But in the world of Azeroth, high-level mysteries would always crush low-level mysteries. Without enough energy, ordinary attacks would be useless against high-ranking demons. This was truly unscathed. Even the mandatory 1 HP reduction in the game didn't happen. Perhaps after this ultimate battle, most of the divine weapons that were temporarily created would lose their power and become ordinary metal. It was because of these timely divine weapons that the mortals had the possibility of defeating the terrifying Burning Legion. Orgarin was gone, and the war that involved the entire world of Azeroth was just about to begin. Witnessing and hearing the news of the Legion's return made the leaders of the various countries extremely nervous. After returning, there were no surprises. The throne conference passed the war mobilization motion. Sally's voice sounded in every communication channel in the Alliance again. Emergency broadcast. Emergency broadcast. Just 15 minutes ago, the leaders of the Alliance received accurate news from the Pantheon. The Burning Legion will descend on Azeroth in 360 days. The Throne Conference has passed an emergency motion. The entire Alliance will immediately enter a state of Level 1 combat readiness. From now on, the Alliance will prohibit the sale of food, wine, and alcoholic beverages. The military factory will immediately adjust the production plan. Within 3 days, 3 shifts will be in operation 24 hours a day. The final battle had finally arrived. Everyone knew enough about the return of the army. It could even be said that the Alliance had been waiting for this day for too long. When the news was confirmed, many people didn't panic. Instead, they felt a sense of relief. If they succeeded, their race would continue to multiply. Even if they didn't have 1,000 generations, they would at least be carefree for 100 years. If they failed, the world would be destroyed, and everyone would be finished. There were no rousing slogans, only a calm crowd that began to move towards the barracks and factories in an orderly manner. Even if they weren't on duty, everyone wanted to know what would happen next. In the final days of peace, the Alliance survived 35 years of the Door of Darkness. The 1st of April, year 36 of the Dark Portal. It was a rather amusing day for Duque. Duque suddenly sensed something. Almost at the same time, Nozdormu sent a telepathic message. Duque, can you feel it? Yes. My strength is still okay. No, it's better to let it out. It's impossible to guard against it for thousands of years. There will always be a time when you are weak or when the mortals show a flaw. Instead of pretending that it's scabies, it's better to bear the pain and get rid of it. Whether the wound becomes a fatal wound and dies, or whether the rotten flesh is cut off and completely healed, it all depends on our hard work and luck. After all, the intelligent races of the mortal world weren't created by the Titans. Strictly speaking, the Titans' creation was indeed very perfect. They could perform their duties for tens of thousands of years. They wouldn't feel bored, nor would they feel that anything was wrong, because in their way of thinking, there was no such thing as freedom. Even their way of thinking was fixed. Mortals weren't the same. Freedom gave the intelligent races of the mortal world all kinds of imaginative ideas and magical creativity. At the same time, it stripped them of their stability. This was like the story of the boy who cried wolf. 1 or 2 stern warnings would wake them up. But as time passed, they would unknowingly become slack. To be able to make the entire Alliance operate efficiently, with everyone working together, and persisting in high-intensity labor and preparation for war for 10 years was already quite the limit. Frankly speaking, if the Burning Legion didn't come, the taut string in the hearts of the people would either break, or they would secretly relax. Now it was just right. In the past, Duque didn't know how the Burning Legion would come to Azeroth. According to the original history, Gul'dan in the parallel world of the King of Draenor was still alive and kicking. Then he crossed time and space, rolled from the magically modified Draenor to Azeroth, and opened the ancient portal that had been sealed for a long time. That was the portal that was opened in the ancient war. Here came the problem. The Gul'dan in the timeline of this world was long dead. His head was cut off and hollowed out. He was first given to Nazul as a magic artifact, Gul'dan's skull. Not long after, Nazul kicked Duque and sent him flying to Draenor, blowing up Draenor. What was amazing was that this thing blew up most of Draenor. Under the protection of Kil'jaeden's power, this magic artifact was actually fine. Then it fell into the hands of Illidan. Gul'dan's skull also fell into the hands of Duque after Illidan was defeated and captured. Duque threw it directly into the Light's Hope Chapel, and let Alonsis fail, and the others seal it for a long time. After unifying the 4 major elemental realms, Duque was worried that this thing would become a scourge, so he directly used the ultimate flame of the Land of Fire to destroy this skull. Now, the one who broke through the void and stepped out of the portal was shockingly Gul'dan. Oh Gul'dan. Having just stepped out of the chaos of time and space, Gul'dan's nerves were in a state of disorder. He was unable to immediately notice Nozdormu and Duque's spying. Duque asked Nozdormu, "Where did this guy come from?" Nozdormu's voice was like a whisper. "This Gul'dan comes from a world in a parallel timeline that I don't know about. Hell, I feel the power of the fallen me in him." When Duque heard this, he almost bit off his own tongue. Right. Duque and Queen Sylvanas traveled through time and space, and almost unified all the timelines where Azeroth had spread out. This almost did not include the timeline where Nozdormu fell, and became the Eternal Dragon King. Obviously, the fallen Nozdormu in the future had tricked Azeroth. Chapter 1997. What should we do? Nozdormu asked Duque. The army will come eventually. Let Gul'dan do it. Are you sure you're not playing with fire? Nozdormu's tone was stern when he asked this question. Duque chuckled and gave Nozdormu an answer using a secret code. In Nozdormu's illusory projection, his elven face suddenly became very interesting. You have already calculated everything? O Titans, are you the king of space and time or am I? Nozdormu was indignant. Stop talking nonsense. Are you going to give it to me or not? Sigh. Up to you. The fate of Azeroth is in the hands of the mortal races. Nozdormu did not care anymore. 30 minutes later, the entire Alliance's defense system was ringing with warning sirens. Stormwind City, Stormwind Fortress. Although it looked like an old-fashioned fortress, it was no longer the same. The outer layer of the fortress was covered with a new type of alloy mixed with nether iron from Pandaria. The outer wall was a meter thick and could easily withstand the attacks of TNT cannons below 300 millimeters. Moreover, the fortress was just a cover, an entrance. The real command center had been placed 200 meters below the Stormwind Fortress. Abnormal spatial fluctuations. Report from the surveillance ship. Seismic waves detected. There's no mistake. The depth is less than 50 meters, almost on the surface. The location is in the middle of the Endless Ocean, confirmed to be the location of the Broken Isles. 10 minutes later. Report. We have a real-time image from the Broken Isles. The energy storm above the Broken Isles has weakened. Our surveillance ship has sent an optical image. Demons from the Burning Legion. Terror Guardians and Apocalypse Guards detected 1,000, 2,000, and still increasing. Confirmed the Burning Legion's Abyssal Lord. 3 presumed to be an intermediate Void Lord. Terror Lords detected, unable to match with the known list. Number 5, presumed to be 2 mid-tier and 3 low-tier Void Lords. Shadow element concentration on the Broken Isles rapidly increasing. Report, we have lost optical image. Surveillance ship Alpha confirmed safe for now. Half an hour ago, all the leaders and generals of the Alliance received a warning from Duque's invasion. They all knew that their commander was an almighty being. While they were surprised, they quickly got into the zone and waited for the final confirmation. In fact, many leaders had already entered battle positions. The frontline commanders such as Varian and Kale, Bats, had already arrived at Naxxramas, which was hovering above the east of the Broken Islands, as well as the Dalajan in the west. The magic of the weave gave them the ability to float in the air for long periods of time. If not for the weave's carrying capacity, Duque wouldn't mind turning all the ships into flying battleships. In reality, it was more economical to use a warship on the sea. Sitting in the command post on Naxxramas, Duque looked at the fog-shrouded beach and couldn't help but think of the original history. On the broken beach, the Alliance and the Horde suffered the most tragic defeat in history. The master thief of MI7, Matthias Shaw, who had never failed, was tricked for the first time. He and his elite intelligence personnel were directly captured and controlled, and sent misleading information to Stormwind City, which directly led to the crushing defeat of the Alliance and the Horde coalition forces. Varian Rin and Wajin, the 2 leaders of the Alliance and the Horde, died in battle on the same day. It brought indelible losses to the Alliance and the Horde. In addition, the death of the Empress Dowager, Tyrion Fordring, made countless people of the Alliance shed tears. Since it was a certain transmigrator who had the final say here, there would naturally be no such thing. Duque's voice began to broadcast throughout the Alliance's military communication network. Where there was a magic mirror, countless soldiers formed circles and quietly looked at the commander who had an ageless face. Duque raised his head, his eyes full of determination. His gaze was so deep that it gave people a sense of confidence that he could see through the past and the future, and that he had the next 5,000 years in his hands. The Burning Legion is here, just as the Alliance had been announcing. Everything that needed to be said had been said. Everything that needed to be prepared has been prepared. Before the war, the last thing I want to say is, since the beginning of the Dark Portal, the people of Azeroth have suffered enough. If the Alliance from 30 years ago had to face the main force of the Burning Legion, I would have all kinds of worries and fears. Because at that time, the Alliance was too young, and the long period of peace had numbed everyone's nerves. But now, We are definitely different. Look around you. What do you see? The most advanced weapons. The most complete preparation. The most extensive and powerful allies. 30 years. We have faced the unprecedented green tide of orcs, resisted the Lich King's undead army, killed the vanguard of the Burning Legion, and destroyed the ancient god and his servants. Believe me and believe in yourselves. This is just another test of survival and destruction. I firmly believe that the people of the Alliance, and even the entire Azeroth, will cross this hurdle. There is only one reason. At this point, Duque suddenly paused. Then, it was as if all the air in their lungs was squeezed out, turning into a roar, turning into a thunderous roar that exploded in the ears of every Alliance soldier. Because, we have been through hundreds of battles. We are invincible. In an instant, the blood in the hearts of the millions of Alliance soldiers was ignited, turning into endless motivation that ran through every blood vessel in their bodies. It was so surging, so shocking. The passion that erupted like a volcano could not be suppressed at all. In the Eastern Kingdom, in Northrend, in Kalimdor, in Pandaria, outside the vortex of the endless ocean, every place with Alliance soldiers let out the same heaven-shaking roar. We have been through hundreds of battles. We are invincible. The raised fists represented the unyielding spirit of the many intelligent beings of Azeroth. Facing evil, we will never yield. Hearing the shouts from every corner of the magic net, feeling the roar that even the sturdy walls of the stronghold could not block, everyone in the command center was so excited that they could not control themselves. Duque waved his hand. Alliance soldiers, attack! 8,000 of the latest flying battleships and 22,000 ships on the sea all sailed towards the Broken Islands. This shocking number, this attack speed, even Gul'dan, who had expected this world's alliance to fight to the death, was momentarily stunned. What kind of joke is this? Where did the Alliance get so many soldiers? Chapter 1998. 30,000 warships was an unscientific number to begin with. Normally, only if Duque stuffed everyone in the Alliance would they be able to operate such a number of warships. After all, with the technological level of the Alliance during World War II, a destroyer needed at least 200 people to operate, and 350 was the standard. A main battleship often needed around 2,000 people. But this was an unscientific fantasy world. Weren't there only a few titans in the pantheon? They could make titan creations. Duque had cheated. For example, on the Alliance's Z-class destroyer, there were people running around everywhere. If one looked carefully, it wouldn't be hard to find that there were very few humans. On the ship, there were more mechanical gnomes with a metallic luster and iron dwarves. That's right, these guys were robots from Odor's Mimiron workshop. The mechanical gnomes with simple intelligence were competent for maintenance and other tasks. As long as the ship's blueprints were inputted into their brains and they had enough materials, they could complete damage control and other tasks. As for the iron dwarves with thick arms, they were the best workers. Carrying cannonballs was a cinch for them. As long as they had a commander, all the transportation work could be easily done. The only problem was that they had to recharge their batteries. After cutting off a large number of unnecessary manpower, what the intelligent races really needed to do was to fire the cannons, sonar, radar, and command. After a significant reduction, a 120-meter-long destroyer only needed 56 living people. Oh, not necessarily alive. It would be fine if they were the Forsaken. Even the largest battleship like the Bismarck only needed 300 people. This was completely unimaginable 5 years ago. Working with Odor, especially after Orgaren opened up the authority of the Protectors, creating a cannon fodder army of mechanical gnomes wasn't a problem at all. In the past few years, Mimiron's workshop had been operating at full speed, and this was the result. Should he learn about Odor Morph? As for shipbuilding, should he learn about Titan Crafting's 3D printed parts? They directly mined high-grade ores in No Scent, refined the ores locally, and produced the flying battleships locally. The flying battleships built in Mimiron's workshop were far better than the steel battleships and bunkers built in the Eastern Kingdom. Later on, other than Iron Furnace Fort, all the other major port cities in the Alliance turned to building ships. On the other hand, the Alliance's main cities focused on the relatively simple flying frigates and destroyers. A smile appeared on Duque's face. It was hilarious to think about the history. The number of people from the Alliance and the Horde who could land on the broken beach was less than 2,000. Even if they were all elites like the Paladins of the Silver Hand, it would not be surprising for them to be wiped out under the attack of the Sea of Demons. But now, I'm sorry, but the Alliance definitely has the upper hand on the battlefield. The fleet here wasn't the entire Alliance, and of course it wasn't the entire Burning Legion. It didn't matter how many billions of demons there were in the Burning Legion, as long as you could come over. A dozen Alliance single-propeller fighter jets were the first to arrive at the Broken Beach airspace. These were the P-51 Mustang fighter jets created by Duque. Duque had risen to power in the 15th year of the Dark Portal, and it had taken him 10 years to allow the Alliance to climb the technological tree from the wooden warships of the Olden Era to the era of steel warships. Many of the technologies were missing or temporarily stuck. It took another 10 years for the uneven development of the military technology tree to reach the level of Earth's World War II. It wasn't that the Alliance didn't have faster fighter jets, but they weren't real fighter jets. They were modified from the magic net, and they consumed a lot of wind elements. Even if Duque controlled the 4 elements of Azeroth, he couldn't use a large amount of the elements on the fighter jets. The speed of the P-51 Mustang was definitely enough, and the main point was to break through defenses. The rumbling in the sky attracted Ghoul Dan's attention. He raised his head and looked in the direction of the sound with his crooked eyes. There were 2 fighter jets in a group, and a total of 8 fighter jets were arranged in a herringbone formation. This formation couldn't be a coincidence. Also this speed, it's so fast. Even though Ghoul Dan was a powerful lackey of the Burning Legion, his position was at most that of a low-level Void Lord. If it wasn't for the power that Kill Jaden had given him, the demons around him wouldn't even care about him. Tsk. Ghoul Dan leaned on the skeletal staff that was like a walking stick and took a deep breath. He had already realized that the Alliance had definitely come prepared. The idea of setting up a trap on the Broken Beach to trap the Alliance, and the Horde was destroyed before it even started. Take them down. Ghoul Dan raised his skeletal staff, and instantly, dozens of Eridar warlocks took over. As the elites of the Eridar tribe, the standards of the Eridar Magi were already quite shocking. Furthermore, on the Broken Islands, the shadow energy that was emitted from the Tomb of Sargeras made them even more powerful. The Mustang was indeed very powerful, but it depended on who the opponent was. If it was an opponent with similar technology, like a propeller-type fighter jet, it could easily defeat most of the Earth's World War II fighter jets. But if it was something from the mystical side, they wouldn't be able to go against it. Even if the elemental radar on the aircraft suddenly sounded an alarm, most of the pilots' reactions were a beat slower. The shadow elements suddenly gathered in the sky, forming a sticky space. When the fighter jet crashed into it, it was like falling into the sea. The sudden change in density caused more than 10 Mustang jets to be smashed to pieces on the spot. Only the ace pilot flying at the back pulled the lever to the limit, causing the high-speed fighter jet to fly in the largest arc, narrowly avoiding the death trap. That was enough. They were here to scout. Pegasus 05 has discovered the enemy. It's the Burning Legion. The coastline is different from the original map, now corrected to X. Nothing was more important than first-hand information on the coastline. When the second battle of the Dark Portal had ended, Ghoul Dan had come to the Tomb of Sargeras on the Broken Islands. The Broken Islands had actually existed in the center of the Endless Sea for the past 10,000 years, but it was surrounded by a huge whirlpool. The people inside couldn't leave, and the people outside couldn't enter. Even though the Alliance had developed flying ships, they still couldn't change this situation. The terrifying elemental undulations from the huge whirlpool formed a hurricane, which could easily destroy flying ships and ships on the sea. Ghoul Dan had come here more than 30 years ago, and he had also lost an entire fleet. But after he arrived, he used his evil power to raise part of the land that had sunk to the bottom of the sea. This was the broken beaches of today. The Alliance seriously lacked the geographical data of the broken beaches. Without this, they couldn't determine the shooting data, and there was no way to talk about long-range bombing. The Alliance sacrificed their reconnaissance planes to obtain the most precious first-hand information. Chapter 1999. Reporting, we've received the latest data. Calibrate, then test the main cannon of the 7th Fleet, Marshal Taylor ordered. 30 seconds later, the 7th Fleet in the east of the Broken Beach began to fire. The three 460mm cannons roared, and after a minute, the huge metal shells crossed the distance of 30,000 meters and began to fall on the Broken Beach. Seeing the high-speed shells in the distance, Ghoul Dan instinctively felt that something was wrong. This Ghoul Dan was not the Ghoul Dan who had only experienced the first and second battles of the Dark Portal. He was the King of Draenor, who had experienced a branch timeline. Because he was born in a branch timeline, his strength could not compare to the original Ghoul Dan at this point in time. Just because he was not strong enough did not mean that he was not knowledgeable enough. After seeing the advanced technology that the goblins had passed on to the beastmen, Ghoul Dan immediately jumped up. Stop them! Stop those things! If the shells were so easy to stop, they wouldn't be shells. With an initial speed of 780 meters per second, coupled with the extreme speed and destructive power produced by the acceleration of gravity, how could it be so easy to stop them? Even though hundreds of Apocalypse guards hurriedly flew into the air, only a few succeeded. Huge metal shadows swept past the demons' retinas and crashed into the ground beside them. The smaller and more agile demons could still dodge subconsciously. The huge lords of the abyss had no place to dodge. They were practically born as meat shields. Boom, boom, boom. A series of loud noises rang out. If it was a mortal's eardrums, they would definitely be pierced. The continuous explosions spread along the entire coastline and into the depths of the Broken Beach. Countless sand and large rocks were lifted from the beach, mixed with seawater and torn flesh. Some Apocalypse guards fluttered their wings in panic and retreated at a speed of tens of meters per second, but they were still caught up by the explosions and swallowed up. A certain Lord of the Abyss was hit by a large caliber shell. Its fat dragon-shaped lower body swelled up like a balloon and then exploded. Flesh and blood flew everywhere. With this as the background, more and more demons were blown into the sky. Enemy attack. Mainly physical attacks. There's also a considerable amount of fire elemental attacks. Ghoul Dan was a demigod warlock. Even if he was reduced to a dog, his life-saving abilities were still considered strong among demigods. He immediately sacrificed a void demon to form a powerful shadow shield to block the shockwaves of the explosion. He also used the Hellhound's super magic resistance to resist the damage of the fire elements. The other demons were not as arrogant as him. Most demons did not like to use shields. Their tyrannical physiques and natural elemental resistance were the best shields. Now they were paying with their lives for neglecting to defend. Bastard! Wizards! Where are the wizards? Our covert operation has failed. We need to set up the magic formation and shield immediately. We can't let the enemy's shells hit our vanguard unscrupulously. Ghoul Dan roared in anger. All demons, adjust your resistances if you can. Whether it was a magic array or a large-scale war spell, the most important thing was time. Unfortunately, the Alliance wouldn't give him time to react. This time, a strange phenomenon appeared in the western sky. Countless golden arrows of light fell from the sky like fireworks, turning into a golden rain that rained down. The leaders of the Throne Conference maintained a constant connection. Of course, Duque was also connected to a special magic communication network for his harem. In this network, Elugia exclaimed, "So beautiful!" Kalia, who knew next to nothing about war, became a rare expert. Right. These new shells are called missiles. Yes, they're the East Wind Type 3 Holy Light missiles. Huh? How did you remember? Hey, I once asked Duque why the Alliance's new missiles were called the East Wind series, Kalia said with admiration. Duque suddenly recited a poem to me. The east wind night blooms on 1,000 trees, and when it blows, stars fall like rain. Wow. So poetic. It wasn't just Elugia. A few girls exclaimed as well. It's so beautiful. I didn't think that Duque could use a poem to describe the scene of a missile tearing through the sky and entering the battlefield. Tyron praised sincerely. Duque looked like he was constipated. God damn it. When Kalia asked him, he just happened to be in his sage time. A man in his sage time could easily think about life. Who knew what had gotten into him to suddenly think of this? Alright, he even became famous. Now that his sister praised him, Duque thought about it and apologized in his heart. He decided to secretly press down the coffin of a certain Chinese poet with the surname Xian. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The holy light suddenly shot out, and the shadow fog that had just risen into the air was cancelled out by the holy light of the opposite attribute. The demons, who had barely managed to survive the torrential rain of cannonballs, had their bodies completely pierced through. They fell heavily and rolled awkwardly on the muddy beach floor, howling in pain. Blue-black demon blood flowed to the ground and mixed with the seawater, turning into a thick, stinky liquid. No. This can't go on. Where are those bastards' fleets? Gul'dan shouted. They're almost there. One of the demons acting as his assistant had an undisguised look of disdain. The void battlefield outside Azeroth's atmosphere had been the battlefield of the Pentashade dragons for the past 25,000 years. They abided by the mission given to them by the Titans, and never retreated even in death. However, as the power of the 5 dragon aspects of the Sleeping Dragon Temple weakened, and the Pentashade dragons suffered heavy losses in many battles, the protection circle of planet Azeroth was different from the one in history. It could be said that it was still there, but in reality, its effectiveness had been greatly reduced. It wasn't even 30% of its peak. Now, on planet Azeroth's orbit, there was something unusual. Since ancient times, there had only been 2 moons in Azeroth. Now there were 4. The other 2 were not natural celestial bodies, and of course they were not the Titans' creations. It was Elune who had spent a lot of effort and used her divine power to catch 2 comets that passed by Azeroth, and without affecting the rotation of Azeroth, she brought them into the planet's gravitational circle. At this moment, all the mages who were monitoring the space outside Azeroth's atmosphere through the magic network were alarmed at the same time. In the huge celestial body that was jokingly called the Third Moon by the Alliance, there was a very modern command post. It became noisy inside. Alert! Alert! The Burning Legion's Void Fleet has been discovered. The number is 2,000, 3,000, and still increasing. They are all star destroyers. Strangely, all the staff inside were fire demons. Chapter 2000. Monitoring templates were made with fire demons that were 4 or 5 meters tall, with elemental conduction as the transmission method, and arcane magic mirrors. Every fire demon was busy in front of their control panel. Majordomo Executus, the commander of the fortress, even had to face more than 100 mirror screens to deal with different situations. Even Duque, who had seen this scene with his own eyes, wondered if he had entered the wrong set and gone to Star Wars. In fact, this was not the same thing. Azeroth needed protection. At this point in history, the Dragon Sleeping Temple had collapsed, and of the original 5 dragon aspects, only Alexstrasza and Isera were left. The planet's protection array had failed. The Burning Legion's planet destroyers could land wherever they wanted. Duque once complained that the Burning Legion's spaceship, which couldn't blow up a planet with one shot, had the nerve to be called a planet destroyer. Later, Duque understood. Not everyone who stuck their penis in the ground would be the same as looks the entire planet. Humans couldn't. Planet destroyers could. Think about it. How did the Burning Legion use this triangular cone-shaped planet destroyer in history? The bow of the ship fell down and plunged into the ground, and then the portal on the ship opened, through which thousands of demon soldiers were released. Wasn't this like rape? They just stuck it in and shot out a bunch of crap, polluting the enemy. Thinking of this, Duque felt that the planet destroyer was worthy of its name. In history, the Burning Legion used this trick to turn Azeroth upside down. Think about it, in Azeroth, where there were no large-scale flying ships and few mages, they just dropped a planet destroyer in a random no-man's land. If left alone, tens of thousands of demons would appear one day later. They might not be able to deal with it even if they sent 100,000 troops. If left alone, Azeroth would be destroyed. This was even more disgusting than the Scourge. The Burning Legion could parachute wherever they wanted, and the Alliance and the Horde, who lacked mobility, could only watch. Duque really didn't know how the Alliance and the Horde survived the original space-time. Since Duque was here, of course, it had to be changed. The so-called third moon was a relatively round comet. The widest part was 10 kilometers, and the narrowest part was 2 kilometers. The third moon looked like a huge fireball. A huge amount of fire elements covered the entire celestial body. In the universe, unless it was a star that emitted light and heat on its own, the terrifying vacuum would absorb all energy and annihilate all flames. When Duque first proposed this idea, almost all of his allies objected, thinking that Duque was being too whimsical. Duque had engraved a giant Titan runic magic array inside the comet, giving it gravity. At the same time, he connected the Azeroth weave to the comet, allowing the fire elemental energy in the Land of Flames to enter the comet through the spatial tunnel. When Elun used her divine power to fix the comet in the orbit of planet Azeroth, and used the power of the moon goddess to restrain the leakage of fire elements, a space fortress was born. Dumok named it the City of Condors in a very bad taste. The only problem was that it was impossible for mortals to operate such a huge elemental fortress. Just the vacuum of outer space was enough to kill all mortals. Originally, Duke wanted the Draenei to contribute an airship as the core, but the Draenei, who were lacking in space technology, said they could not do it. In the end, Duque waved his hand and let the fire demons do the work. Anyway, elemental creatures wouldn't die as long as the elements in their bodies weren't exhausted. Hence this scene happened. Target, Burning Legion's planet destroyer fleet. Executus ordered. Target locked. Very good. Wrath of the Fire God. Launch. The proud fire demon leader waved his arm heavily. In terms of fighting and hacking, he was absolutely third-rate. Ever since he followed Duque, his status hadn't been low. Now this position was more suitable for him to use his strengths. Every fire demon cannoneer could clearly see the dazzling crimson beam of light shooting towards the planet destroyer battleships. This was really a terrifying scene. It violently impacted the minds of everyone in the Alliance headquarters in the Eastern Kingdom who was watching this scene. At this moment, the Burning Legion fleet was dumbfounded. The demons had been fighting with the five-color dragon guardian of Azeroth for almost 25,000 years. They had lost countless times under the planetary defense arrays, but they had never been attacked from a distance of 1,000 kilometers. Of course, they were curious about why there were 2 more moons in Azeroth, but they didn't expect this to happen. After years of fighting, they had long known the strength of the five-color dragon guardian. If they didn't enter the void battlefield area, at least 100 kilometers away from the five-color dragon guardian's void fortress, there wouldn't be any dragons attacking them. This scene subverted all their knowledge and imagination. In the front of the Legion fleet, more than 100 planet destroyers that were directly hit by the main cannon of the City of Condors disappeared in an instant. The excessive high temperature and high concentration of fire elemental energy made it so that they didn't even have time to explode. After the organic and inorganic matter evaporated together, only complete nothingness was left. As for whether the demons on the ships would have a chance to resurrect, only God knew. The explosion occurred in the rear, in the second row of the Legion fleet. Some of the explosions occurred in the left and right rows that were not directly hit. The ships further out were also affected by the irresistible energy shockwaves and shook out of order. What an idiotic rookie captain. He drove the starship to the edge of the sun, and was affected by the solar wind. In the communication circuit of the first ship that hit Yusheng, it was filled with wails and screams. The warlocks of Eridar were all cursing. What's going on? How can the natives of Azeroth have such advanced space weapons? Have they analyzed the technology of the Pantheon? Impossible. We spent 10,000 years and barely analyzed 80% of the functions of the planet destroyer. We can't even stabilize the main cannon. How can those ignorant natives have this kind of ability? What should we do? Continue? Idiot. Do you want to pay for all of Master Sardra's planet destroyers? This was the weakness of the Burning Legion. That's right. As long as the demon's soul was not destroyed, his soul could theoretically return to the distorted nether and resurrect infinitely. They were the most powerful cannon fodder in the world. No race could stop them in an infinite number of battles. But the planet destroyers were not infinite. The technology of the Pantheon's planet destroyers was many times higher than that of the Eridar wizards. It was a level of technology that could not be kept up with. They could not even look up to it. The army had spent 25,000 years, and had not been able to replicate even a prototype ship, let alone mass-produce it. Chapter 2001. 1138 Planet Destroyers. That was the damage caused by the Vulcan's wrath. Such a devastating blow made the souls of the burning legions Void Dukes tremble. It's impossible for a cannon of this level to recharge quickly. Let's take the chance and destroy this fortress, a Void Duke suggested. He was about to be slapped in the face. The elemental fluctuations of the opponent's fortress are intensifying. Obviously, the opponent's fortress is connected to the fire elemental realm. Recharging. That's fast. They can probably recharge a second time in 200 seconds. Eridar's analysts expressed their opinions. 200 seconds for one time? How were they supposed to fight that? The entire Burning Legion had less than 20,000 starships. There were only about 12,000 planet destroyers with assault capabilities. The rest were all normal starships that could not be equipped with mobile teleportation doors. They did not have much firepower or defense. They were similar to the starships that Neru and Willen used to lead the Drenii to escape. They were purely used for transportation, but their strategic value was better than nothing. Usually, the army had strict limits on the damage of planet destroyers. If they lost 2 planet destroyers while attacking a normal planet, the commander's soul would be ripped out and sent to kill Jaden's flame cage to howl for eternity. This is not the end of it. I don't believe that the fire element on planet Azeroth is infinite. Furthermore, how can a fortress defend an entire planet? The Void Dukes did not believe it. They took a big detour and came to the other side of planet Azeroth. As expected, the fortress that looked like a small sun could not follow them. However, there was another dark blue fortress on the other side of the planet. It was almost black. Let's give it a try. This time, the army's fleet learned their lesson. They sent out 600 planet destroyers to form an umbrella shape. They widened the distance between the ships and slowly surrounded the fortress. Then they ran into a fortress that looked like a hedgehog. It was a very strange attack method. Countless icicles condensed from frost elements appeared strangely in the void around the fortress, pouring firepower on the Star Destroyer in a way that had almost no blind spots. Don't panic. Switch to the elemental vision. The more experienced Eridar wizards quickly mastered it. When one's field of vision changed from ordinary light absorption to perception element, one would discover that at the center of this fortress that was roughly 15 kilometers in diameter, there were countless elemental channels of varying thickness and thinness that were like tree roots extending outwards. These twisting elemental veins formed a complex and ever-changing elemental energy projection network. It's the elemental passage of the frost element. The Void Dukes concluded. We can attack. The frost elemental was different from the other elements. It was not suitable to be used as the main cannon of the stronghold. Frost elementals freeze too easily, which limits their range. Mavelin's Shavala's matriarch judged. The Fell Lord Zakam made the decision. 2,000 assault ships as the vanguard, close in like an umbrella. The main force of the planet destroyers will hold the rear, and we will take this fortress in one fell swoop. The 2 satellite fortresses on either side of planet Azeroth were too much for the Burning Legion to handle. If both strongholds were there, the Burning Legion would be at a disadvantage. They could only break through the blind spot between the 2 strongholds. Not only was it narrow, but there were also other satellites. 12 satellites that were only 1 kilometer in diameter emitted a dazzling metallic reflection under the sun. No one knew how the people of Azeroth did it, but this mirror-like armor should not exist in the world. This probably had nothing to do with the indigenous civilization. It was more like a creation of the Titans. The mirror-like spheres glowed in a moving neon light, looking almost noble and elegant. But in fact they were powerful killing devices that were connected to the magic net. Their existence perfectly made up for the blind spots of the 2 fortresses. This was also why the Burning Legion would rather attack one of the fortresses. If they chose to attack these small satellites, they would most likely be attacked by the two fortresses. After all, no one could guarantee that the stronghold cannons only had a range of 1,000 kilometers. The Burning Legion's assault had achieved some results. It seemed that the composition of this fortress was different from the other fire element fortress. The low mobility of the frost element meant that although the firepower of this fortress covered a wide range, the range of single element attacks was very short. Haha. This fortress isn't that hard to deal with. Zakkum laughed loudly. On the other side, in Shivala's fleet, Matriarch Mavalens had a different opinion. Be careful. Since the natives of Azeroth are relying on it, there must be a reason. Don't be like those rash fools. Even though the Burning Legion's fleet appeared to be advancing on the left and lagging behind on the right, after 2 hours of cruising and pressing, there were still 500 assault ships approaching the dark blue fortress that seemed to have a liquid surface. Attack. As long as we enter close combat. That's the Burning Legion's world. Zakkum roared. Unbeknownst to them, a haughty and valiant figure in the dark blue stronghold let out a disdainful snort. She was Servana's. As an elemental demigod, she did not need to breathe. Breathing was a habit she had developed over thousands of years. Gently twirling her golden hair with her left index finger, Sylvanas remembered the name of this fortress. That bastard Duque was unexpectedly stubborn when it came to naming new things. Originally, since this was a fortress for her use, it had to be named Sindorii, or Windrunner or something. In the end, Duque F** kept Sylvanas for 3 days and forced her to give in. Of course, Sylvanas was so prideful that she would definitely not tell others about this. She waved her hand. Izaran Fortress, heed my command. Prepare Thor's hammer. The high-level wind elementals below immediately began to operate. Thousands of elemental circuits suddenly opened, and shocking elemental energy surged out of the tunnel connected to the wind god's throne. If converted into electricity, it would be a terrifying amount of energy measured in units of megawatts. When all the wind elementals turned into lightning and gathered at the forefront of the fortress near the enemy fleet, shock froze on the faces of the Void Dukes for the first time. Damn. What is this? Longsong cannons? No. This thing is even more powerful than the previous one. This time, a huge beam of light surrounded by purple-blue lightning shot from the Izaran fortress toward the Burning Legion fleet. Like a sharp cone piercing through paper, it pierced through the energy shields and composite armor of the assault ships and planet destroyers, causing a violent internal explosion. Small white light bubbles quickly appeared in space, and the people in the Izaran fortress could see this scene on the screen. These light bubbles extended into the depths of the void, and the energy waves caused by their simultaneous explosion looked like a galaxy. Of course, this also meant that in this instant, the Burning Legion lost thousands of battleships and millions of demons. Chapter 2002. Haha. Great. Well done. Destroy those damned demons. Roar. Whether it was the Alliance people who saw this scene from the monitoring center on the ground, or the 5 color dragons on standby in the Void Fortress, they all cheered and praised. It had been 25,000 years. There used to be so many 5 color dragons that they blotted out the sky. Under the effect of the anti-titans and the magic array that targeted the demons, the Burning Legion could only make minor harassment attacks. After the Gate of Darkness, the losses of the dragons increased day by day. It took too much time and energy for the 5 color dragons to cultivate an adult dragon. The war could not keep up with the consumption at all. The absence or weakening of the 5 guardian dragons led to the reduction of the restraints of the magic array on the demons, which in turn increased the losses of the 5 color dragons. In front of the demons who had infinite recovery power, this was simply a vicious cycle. Originally, Alexstrasza had already made a general mobilization order to fight to the last soldier. As long as they did not fall, the nature imprinted in their souls would drive them to do so. This was the corresponding price that the Titans had to pay to awaken their wisdom from the ignorant and primitive ancestor dragons, and promote them to the 5 color dragons. The existence of the Alliance's Void Fortress perfectly filled the gap in the Void Battlefield's combat power of the dragons. The dazzling lightning ran through the front and middle of the entire Burning Legion Void fleet. Even though the Void Lords had scattered the formation of the fleet, the damage caused by the chain spread of the lightning still shocked the entire Burning Legion. The Burning Legion had traveled across the universe in the past 25,000 years and destroyed countless galaxies. The number of planet destroyers they had lost was only a little more than 300. Today was definitely a day of suffering for the planet destroyers. 2 shots of the main cannons directly turned more than 5,000 planet destroyers into space garbage. What made the Burning Legion even more desperate was that the Iserlohn fortress really finished charging in 4 minutes and gave the fleet a second shot of Mjolnir. At this moment, the Void Lords really knew that this was not a universe fortress connected to the water elemental realm at all, but a compound fortress connected to both the water and wind elemental realms. When the second shot of Mjolnir swept through the entire vanguard force and the core force of the Legion fleet twice, even the ferocious demons began to collapse. The ferocity of the 2 satellite fortresses disrupted the entire army's attack plan. Only Duque, Queen Sylvanas, and Kale, Bats heaved a sigh of relief. They had finally tricked the army. At the end of the day, be it the so-called Condor City or Iseron Fortress, they were all products whose technology was not up to standard, and they had been forcibly made up for with magic. Let's not talk about whether the short-range anti-air firepower on the fortress would be enough after the enemy had broken through to close range. The number of soldiers in the fortress was definitely not enough to defend against any of the Burning Legion's demon divisions. The stronghold wasn't complete and didn't have a sealed environment. This directly reduced the number of races and manpower available. He didn't even need to think about it. He could only use elemental creatures. Low-level elemental creatures without intelligence could not effectively resist the demon army. It was bound to be filled with a large number of highly intelligent elemental creatures, such as the fire demons. Moreover, such a large fortress would require more than 100,000 short-range cannons of various calibers. Otherwise, there would be gaps in the firepower network. Once they entered close combat, they would still be finished. Furthermore, Azeroth didn't have an endless supply of elementals. The seemingly invincible main cannon of the fortress fired 2 consecutive shots from Mjolnir, which consumed 10% of the wind elements that could be controlled by the entire Azeroth. In reality, in order to maintain the balance of the world, the maximum loss of any element could not exceed 30%. Otherwise, it would cause the elements to become chaotic and collapse, causing another great cataclysm. Fortunately, because the Void Dukes had brains, they were stunned by Duque's all-out attack. On the second day, they gave up on attacking the 2 fortresses. Instead, they began to break through the blind spots of the 2 satellites. Those were the 2 meridians of Azeroth. What Duque had set up there were 12 evenly distributed small military satellites that were worn outside the planet like a necklace. These military satellites, which were modified from asteroids that Alen had captured, were not connected to the elemental realm, but to the magic net. Thus, the ones who actually controlled the satellites were the heroic spirits of the magic net, led by Khadgar. These military satellites had 360-degree attack capabilities. Long-range frost arrows, arcane beam cannons, flame blast throwers, flaming storm generators. There were all sorts of magical weapons. Moreover, Duque had set up heat absorption spell formations on these satellites that were also nodes of the magic net. They could use the sun's energy to replenish a large amount of fire elements. After being converted by the magic net, they could be used as a semi-permanent source of energy. With the help of the chromatic dragons, large amounts of wreckage of the army's battleships scattered in the orbit of the planet were collected. They were melted at high temperatures to form a layer of alloy armor. Of course, it was not as sturdy as the legendary pure mirror armor. However, with a silver background and a metallic luster around it, the satellites looked like a pearl necklace of the entire planet Azeroth. Moon God's Necklace. Duque used this name to curry favor with his allies. Magical weapons were more efficient in using the elements, but their power and range were not as good. Even the furthest attack weapon had a range of only about 10 kilometers. Even in the face of the Burning Legion's fierce attacks, the satellites had tried their best to intercept them. On the second day, more than 300 assault ships and 100 star destroyers had successfully broken through the defense line formed by the moon god's necklace and the chromatic dragons, successfully entering the atmosphere. With regards to this news, Queen Sylvia, who was always looking for the best, was very anxious. Duque had the opposite attitude. Please, we can't build a perfect network on such a large planet. We can't even fit a single starship in. If we want to do that, we need to build a concentric cover larger than planet Azeroth to protect the entire Azeroth. Duque shrugged. Moreover, we've already achieved our goal of chasing the enemy to where we want them to be. There's no need to be too demanding. That's right. Entering the atmosphere did not mean that they could land vertically. Due to the planet's rotation and the resistance of planet Azeroth's atmosphere, the spacecraft would actually fly in a parabola-like arc when they landed. The final destination was already in Duque's calculations. According to the System Elf's calculations, all the Burning Legion spaceships would fall into 6 areas. The Western Wilderness, the Hillsbrad Hills, Tanaris Azhara, Danmoro, and the Northern Barrens. Chapter 2003. Anyway, every Alliance soldier felt that it was amazing why the Burning Legion spaceships that were descending on that longitude had to fly in those predestined trajectories. In the case of unsuccessful discussions, they could only attribute the reason to Duque being a powerful god who had mastered spatial magic or something. Duque was a bit bitter. He didn't know how to explain this. This involved a full set of laws of physics. In fact, even Duque himself didn't understand it. Holy **T. The system genie had calculated it for him. When Duque turned the system's calculations into trajectories and projected them on the big screens of the various Alliance war zones, there was a commotion in the crowd. Wow. This is really so accurate. Even though Duque had added so much black technology to Azeroth, it wasn't easy to create an ambush circle. In particular, the ambush circle couldn't be too large. Otherwise, according to the communication capabilities of this era, it was very likely that they would lose sight of one thing. No one could guarantee that all kinds of communication would work on the battlefield. Any ambush circle with a diameter of more than 10 kilometers was very easy to get into trouble. On the other hand, to limit the enemy's landing range was also a super technical job. This was beyond the scope of the system. In the entire world, only Duque could do it. None of the demons of the Burning Legion expected that there were still hundreds of flying turrets in the stratosphere of Azeroth. These turrets were often not big. On round stones about 100 meters in diameter, dozens of cannons were installed. Except for a magic cannon similar to the main cannon of the Dalajan 20 years ago, the rest were all anti-aircraft cannons. This made these turrets look even more like hedgehogs. The new magic cannons built by Oder were all controlled by Duque with the system. This was the same as when Duque played the 100-handed Reaper back then. It was an enhanced version of one man is an army. The allies on the ground looked at the scene in the sky that looked like half of the end of the world. It was a long line of fire in the sky like a comet falling to the ground after countless planet destroyers forced their way into the atmosphere. It looked like a meteor, but it wasn't. Just as everyone was silently waiting for the comet to hit the ground, a dazzling purplish-blue light shone in the sky. At first, it was a purple light spot, but soon after, every light spot blossomed with a brilliance like that of a star. When the light spots reached their brightest, clusters of light that flew diagonally upward against the meteor shower appeared. So beautiful! In the command center, Sally Whitemane exclaimed. The sky-defying clusters of light were straight, but the zigzagging flying battleships that drew huge arcs in the sky were like moths flying into a flame. It looked like they had actually crashed into the purple light cannons on their own. Bang! 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 In the night sky, countless dazzling flames lit up. The huge meteor suddenly shattered into pieces in the sky, turning into even more scattered and resplendent fragments. From afar, it looked like a fireworks display, but everyone knew what it meant. They still remembered the final battle between the Alliance and the Horde 6 years ago. The cannonball of the Alliance's battleships had blown up the Horde's old flying battleship, and the thick parts of the battleship had also turned into scattered petals in the storm. The only difference was that this battle had taken place at an unimaginably high altitude. Anyone with a bit of common sense would know that the further the distance, the greater the error. Perhaps because the hands on the turret had trembled and missed by a millimeter. When the cannonball had flown 10 kilometers away, the error would be more than 100 meters. This kind of unimaginable sniping could only be done by the commander of the Alliance, who wasn't a true god but was stronger than a true god. In the various command centers, the Alliance soldiers were jubilant. Long live the Alliance! Long live Lord Marcus! In fact, if Duque wanted to, he could even destroy this batch of 1,128 army battleships in the atmosphere. But he didn't do that. This wasn't a war for him alone. This was a war for all intelligent beings in the Azeroth. If he alone could take on this war, he didn't mind the Alliance people standing at the side cheering him on. Unfortunately, Kil'jaeden would come. Sargeras would come. This time, there was no longer the anti-Titan formation suppressing their strength. When the experts who had stepped into the realm of gods fought against the strongest experts of the army, it was time for the mortals to bear the heavy responsibility of defense. In today's world where technology was changing with each passing day, 5 years was already a generation of soldiers. Many of the veterans who had actual combat experience had become sergeants or even generals. The ones who were going to fight on the front lines were the new recruits with no actual combat experience. Real combat was completely different from the simulated battle that Duque had the Eridar twins drag a group of captured demons with them. New soldiers had to go through trials of blood and fire in order to grow. How to make the recruits grow at a lower cost was the responsibility of every commander, who racked their brains to complete it. Duque left about 10 planet destroyers and more than 40 assault ships at each landing point. Rumble. The assault ships landed forcefully, plowing a long trench in the fields of the western wilderness. The planet destroyers were even more anti-biological. They didn't care about the lives of the passengers inside, and directly destroyed the planet. Without slowing down at all, they plunged into the ground with a loud bang. The huge bow of the ship, more than 200 meters long, sank into the soil just like that, leaving only a strange ball of light emitting green fluctuations on the body of the ship, constantly flickering. In less than half a minute, the green ball of light suddenly expanded and turned into a 3-story tall portal. Blue-skinned demon guards with giant axes began to rush out one after another. This scene was seen by the magic eyes that had been set up near the predetermined ambush circle. In the western wilderness, Marshal Jirian Antonsman waved his hand in the Death Mine's headquarters under Moon Creek Town. A minute later, the Alliance's counterattack arrived. Not only was there the routine bombardment, but there were also hundreds of flying turrets in the sky. These turrets had a completely different mechanism from the Alliance's warships. They were more like hedgehogs that attracted the demons' firepower. Not only did they have magic cannons and conventional cannons, but they also had extremely heavy armor. Alloy armor that was more than a meter thick was wrapped around the granite, adding a bit of hardness. When the cannons scattered the formation of the demon soldiers, densely packed mechanical creatures began to surround them. Other than the standard tracked tanks and self-propelled cannons, there were also mechanical beasts equipped with heavy armor, such as the lion type and the spider type. They moved with great agility, as if they were real creatures. From afar, they looked like a colony of marching metal ants that were about to devour everything in their path. This was the perfect combination of Odor's mechanical army, the Alliance's tanks and long-range cannons. Chapter 2004. Mechanical gnomes and iron dwarves lacked intelligence, so the Alliance soldiers mixed in with the mechanical army were in charge. As soon as the battle started, sparks flew everywhere. Of course, as the ambushers, the Alliance had an advantage in terms of casualties. With the near-perfect coordination of cannons and infantry, only one mechanical creation would fall for every 10 demons. In the hills of Hillsbrad, Marshal Windsor, who was old but vigorous, was leading the warriors. Having become Duke's retainer, he had been coerced and enticed by Duke to join the ranks of immortals a year ago under the pretext of for the survival of mankind. Duke controlled the number of people who could obtain eternal life very well. Basically, Anyone who was above the rank of lieutenant general would be able to obtain an eternal life spot. Everyone looked at the young and handsome Marshal Windsor in the command seat. Even after a year, they still felt very strange. In Tanaris, Brigida Bendis was in charge of the battle. Azhara was Tyron's adopted daughter, the current high priest of the Night Elves, Chandris. In Danmoro, Muradin Bronzebeard was naturally in charge. In the barren lands of the north, Varrock Salyafar led 100,000 orcs. Under the cover of the Alliance's cannons and battleships, they cleared the invading demons in an orderly manner. If the Burning Legion still had a boss who was rational enough to control the overall situation, they would realize the problem of the army: many losses, not many results, and they could not open up the situation. Unfortunately, there was none. There were many factions within the Burning Legion. This dog-eat-dog relationship meant that communication would not be smooth. The demons of other races could not wait to see the other races fall. It was fine if they mocked and ridiculed them, but the key was all kinds of concealment and deception. Those with large losses would exaggerate their achievements, and then put a bunch of destroyed planet destroyers into the category of medium damage and heavy damage. When they returned, they would shove it to Morgur. If they could not repair it, it meant that the Morgur's skills were not good enough. The news from here was that they had successfully landed and killed 100,000 weak mortals. On the other side, it would be 300,000 or 1,000,000. What the hell? Fake reports were everywhere. The most important thing was that the only boss in the army who could control the situation, Kil'jaeden, was not in the position of commander. He was preparing to go to the front lines to take revenge for the past. During the Battle of the Sun well back then, a certain honest and reliable young man had caused him to bleed. His lower body was stuck, causing half of his body to explode in the sun well. He almost died. With only half of his body left, he hid in the deepest part of the distorted void and recuperated for 8 years before his body was complete. Then he spent another 2 years to restore his power to its full state. When he came out of the mountain again, he saw the army in a mess. Those troublesome bastards were actually fighting amongst themselves in the warped void. In a fit of rage, the egg destroyed several high-grade void dukes and their forces that attempted to break through the defenses of its supporters and kill it. Then it slowly reorganized its army. Naturally, he placed all the blame on Duque and the 2 Eridar twins who dared to collude with Duque, betray him, and set him up. After confirming the news of the army's return, Gemini had been worried for a long time. She had hinted many times that the physiological structure of Eridar females was no different from that of Draenei. Should they find out more about it? Duque had cheated many people, and was afraid that Gemini would poison him in some indescribable place. Thus, he had rejected her many times. Gemini, who felt that her life was hanging by a thread, and that she might be sold off by Duque at any time, worked even harder. With the help of these 2 spies, they managed to crack the army's communication channel's password in less than 3 hours after the army's invasion. At this time, a team of 500 people proficient in Eridar's language was nervously monitoring the Burning Legion's communication channel to understand their troop movements. It was these asymmetrical advantages that made up for the difference in military strength between the Burning Legion and the Azeroth Coalition army. This made the battle that the Void Dukes thought could be resolved in 24 hours become a long and endless overtime. Back at the Broken Beach, the battle was one-sided at first. After using the saturation bombardment to wipe out most of the demons on the beach, the Void Dukes could only be dealt with in close combat. While Duque was busy intercepting the army's landing spaceships, Varian gave the order to land. Gul'dan retreated and went to Sargera's tomb to perform the resurrection ritual. The Alliance was actually racing against time. After suppressing the army's demons with the cannons, the Alliance's Marines began to land under the cover of the Naga troops. The battle went smoothly at first. Under the command of the Naga, the Murlocs charged onto the beach. They used spears engraved with holy light runes to deal with the remaining demons. The lords under Vashj, together with the Hydrathian water elemental counts, attacked the middle and low-level Void Dukes. Even the high-level lords couldn't survive more than a tenth of Queen Vashj's lightning arrows. The demons that dared to approach the beach were all torn apart, and didn't dare to approach. The frigates that had a lower draft and the floating cannons that were flying at a lower altitude pressed forward and used the cannons to kill the demons that were the largest and most durable. Just at this moment, a new enemy appeared. Rumble. It was an old friend that the Alliance wasn't unfamiliar with. Fell Reavers. The great warrior Varian Rin, who was the commander of the Alliance at that time in history, had sacrificed his life in order to deal with a fell mech that was clinging onto the Heaven Breaker at the Battle of the Broken Beach. He had no choice but to jump down and kill the fell mech in order to cover the retreat of the Alliance. It wasn't entirely correct to say that it was the Fell Reavers that killed Varian, but the power of the Fell Reavers was undeniable. The 460mm large caliber cannons were replaced with armor-piercing cannons. The TNT Holy Light Rune armor-piercing cannons that weighed more than a ton couldn't break through the defense of this terrifying machine that was 20 stories tall and powered by Fell Reavers. The terrifying cannons that could kill humans and animals within 100 meters only left a shallow dent of a few dozen centimeters. Who knew what kind of metal armor this new version of the Fell Reavers used? The Burning Legion, who were at an extreme disadvantage on the battlefield, suddenly moved. Under the cover of the super meat shield, the Fell Reavers, they fiercely pounced into the Alliance's troops that had just landed. They were like a hot knife through butter as they used all kinds of attacks. Eridar Warlock's evil magic, Doomguard's shadow bolts, Cerberus's anti-magic. Originally, there were already hundreds of landing ships on the beach with amphibious tanks. Coupled with Mimiran's mechanical army, more than half of the beach was occupied by the Alliance. The Burning Legion's counterattack immediately had the momentum to chase the Alliance's troops into the sea. Chapter 2005. The Fell Reaver bent its legs, and the jetpack on its back spewed out green demonic flames. 2 seconds later, the gigantic metal body leaped high into the air. With its weight of more than 100 tons, coupled with the acceleration of gravity, when it stomped down, 2 landing ships that were relatively close to each other and had just lowered their shields were instantly trampled into pieces along with the tanks and soldiers on them. It was too fast. There were no screams, only the flesh and blood that shot out from under the Fell Reaver's feet, as well as the aftermath of the engine's explosion. 2 blood-curdling fountains the size of basketball courts were formed. Even though the Fell Reaver's legs sank deep into the soft sand of the beach due to the terrain, it could not offset the shock. Instinctively, the Alliance soldiers on the beach fired even more firepower at the terrifying meat shield-type Fell Reaver. Bang bang bang. The sound of bullets and arrows flying could be heard. In history, Varian was able to chop off the head of a modified Fell Reaver with a single slash, and that was because it was a divine artifact. In essence, the Fell Reaver was not really a high-tech robot. In the end, it was just a dark energy being draped in high-tech armor. Morger stuffed a large amount of mixed demonic energy equivalent to a low-tier Void Lord into the shell of a Fell Reaver. Then, the Void Lord would pick out a sufficiently powerful soul from the captured souls, and stuffed it into the Fell Reaver's intelligence core. As for loyalty, there was no need to think about it. Back in history, Arthas had destroyed many countries and captured countless souls. There were only 2 who did not succumb to Frostmourne, as soul torture: Uther and Bolvar. The Burning Legion had destroyed countless planets, and many of them were once the souls of powerful enemies. Every race had its heroes, and not every hero had the willpower to persevere in pain and torture for 10,000 years. While the Fell Reaver was few in number, as an assault unit, its power was undeniable. At that moment, Duque snapped his fingers. Snap! It was an unusually crisp sound. In that instant, the surrounding generals all thought in a daze that Duke, this fella who wasn't a true deity, yet surpassed a true deity, just a snap of his fingers and half of the Burning Legion's demons would be wiped out. Actually no. Duque snapping his fingers could only mean one thing. The Alliance was going to use their secret weapon. Those who stayed in the Naxxramas Alliance headquarters were either lieutenants who acted as messengers and monitors, or staff officers with the rank of at least colonel or above. Many generals vaguely knew that the Alliance had a secret research that was like a bottomless pit. Every year, the Alliance spent more than 1 billion gold coins on military expenses, and transferred away a large number of recognized outstanding researchers. The importance of this project could be seen from the fact that Master Craftsman Jurbin was personally overseeing it. When Duque gave the order, they could finally see the true face of the secret weapon. The Burning Legion immediately noticed that the Alliance's flying fleet in the distance had begun to scatter to the left and right. A huge flying battleship with a grayish-black base color and 2 pairs of crimson wings, one large and one small, charged forward at high speed. The huge bow of the ship had a shape similar to the toe of a warboot. The most shocking thing was its size. The 320-meter-long ship was far longer than the 240-meter-long Bismarck. Such a huge flying battleship was enough to amaze the world. What was even more strange was that it used a different power structure from all the flying battleships in the Alliance. The ship's body constantly glowed, telling those who knew it that this was a battleship powered by pure Titan runes. It was completely outside of the magic net, and didn't need any fuel engines. Goddess of Wisdom, Minerva, attack. Please give your orders, Commander. All the more important announcements were made by Sally Whitemane by default. There was no helping it. Dumook just liked her voice. Perhaps this was what it meant to be a voice actor. Duque smiled at the few images in the magic mirror. Are you ready? Ready. A few voices replied in unison. That's good. Attack. On the huge body of the Goddess of Wisdom, 3 large cabin doors that were 10 stories high opened. The Alliance's secret weapon was displayed in front of the world for the first time. Officers and soldiers at the front, retreat immediately. Leave the magic mecha to the Alliance's secret weapon. In the radio communication, the Alliance soldiers were still hot-blooded and fighting to the death. Their duty to carry out orders immediately woke them up, and resolutely carried out the orders of their superiors. Duque had been in charge of the Alliance for 20 years. The biggest thing he did was change the Alliance's military system. Orders were absolute. The soldiers immediately covered each other, found cover, and retreated. The magic mecha was also stunned. It sensed a high-energy reaction in the sky not far away. One after another, huge humanoid mechanical creatures were exposed to the sunlight. In particular, the pure gold metal robot in the lead won the cheers of the entire fleet. The soldiers on the surrounding warships all whistled. Praise the holy light. It looked like that robot was a large silver hand knight. Gold eagle head flying wing pauldrons, gold-edged silver arm guards, gold triangular chest armor, standard silver hand shield. All the parts that needed to be moved were silver scales. Other than the fact that the knight was holding a large ashbringer that was more than 12 meters long and 21 meters tall. He looked like a fully armed version of Tyrion Fordring with a closed helmet and a mask over his face. On the other side, there was a giant paladin robot with a similar appearance. It was covered in purple-blue paint, which told everyone who the owner of this mecha was. Needless to say, it was the rare mutant Thunder Knight Gavinrad Misfortune of the Silver Hand. As for the one in the middle, there was a metal giant with 2 swords on its back, a belt with a lion emblem, and a helmet decorated with a wolf head. 3 voices sounded in the Alliance's command center. Tyrion Fordring, Holy Light Gundam, attack. Gavinrad Misfortune, Gundam of Misfortune, attack. Varian Rin, Wolf God Gundam, attack. Gundam, the common dream of boys and men, had finally been magically modified by Duan Azeroth. Strictly speaking, these Gundams were not robots, because their mechanism had nothing to do with machinery or science. In standard terms, these were just giant exoskeleton mechas that were driven by the Titan Rune magic circle, and could 100% synchronize with the pilot's movements. With the mecha, would the heroes still need to fight the huge monsters of the Burning Legion with their flesh and blood? The Wolf God Gundam was attached to Varian's body. With a thought, with the help of the catapult, the thrusters on its back spewed out surging Titan fire. The 30-ton mecha was like a light tank that had been shot out by a huge cannon. It suddenly broke through the sky and crossed 5 kilometers in just a few seconds, descending on the head of the magic mecha. Chapter 2006. In the cockpit, William's armor was suspended by a movable bracket. The Wolf Deity Gundam mimicked William's movements and made the same strike. At the bottom of the metal saws, Titan energy shot out from the 12 round holes, producing a violent propulsion and acceleration effect. The mechanical arm, which was made of flexible metal that imitated the muscles of an arm, swung the giant beheading sword in the mech's hand, and made a fierce slash that was as heavy as Mount Tai. The giant metal sword, which was exactly the same as William's artifact, Salamani, cut through the void and slashed at the back of the head of the Fell Reaver, which was obviously slower. Crack! The loud sound was like a shot of adrenaline in the ears of the Alliance soldiers. Half of the Fell Reaver's head had completely caved in. Although the Alliance's Gundam was only 1/3 of the Fell Reaver's height, it still looked like an adult fighting a child. Compared to the original version of history, where William was forced to fight such a huge monster with his own body, the situation was much better. The Alliance's Gundam was only inferior in size. Its speed, agility, destructive power, and even strength were much stronger. The metallic mouth of the Fell Reaver that had its head chopped off by William's Gundam opened and closed silently, as though it was about to let out a painful scream. A large amount of dark energy burst out in the form of a green slurry, splashing everywhere. It was obvious that it wanted to drag the Wolf Deity Gundam down with it as it headed towards William's direction. William did not care about this useless scum. He nimbly tapped the Wolf Deity Gundam on the Fell Reaver's chest armor. With the jetpack's ejection, the 7-story tall Gundam swept past the Fell Reaver like a rock spreading its wings. The Gundam's size might not be able to win against the Fell Reaver, and it was afraid of a competition of pure strength. But compared to other demons that were also huge in size, the Gundam was taller. In William, beating up the Doomsday Guards that only reached the Wolf Deity Gundam's chest was exhilarating. On the other side, Gavin Rad's Bad Luck Gundam also began to charge forward. He ejected from the flight deck, and his first target was the back of an Abyssal Lord. The Abyssal Lord's bloated body, thick waist, and peculiar body structure meant that it was useless against attacks from the back. In fact, this race had always been used as a sharp knife for charging. Attacks from the back? In theory, that was the responsibility of the other demons. However, under the effect of gravity, the 35-ton Misfortune Gundam itself was the most terrifying weapon. High Misfortune's legs sank deep into the Abyssal Lord's back, and a terrifying force that could crush a reinforced concrete fortress was concentrated on the relatively narrow metal soles of its feet. Pooh! With a shocking explosion, the Lord of the Abyss's dragon-shaped lower body turned into a crushed tomato. The stinky internal organs and bones turned into shockwaves of flesh and blood when they exploded. Theon's Holy Light Gundam was the most orthodox of attacks. The Golden Giant raised the silver palm emblem shield with its left arm and charged forward with a ferocious shield bash, blocking the mechanical arm of the other Fell Reaver. At the same time, Ashen Messenger, who had been hiding behind the shield before charging over, slashed horizontally from left to right, deeply cutting open the Fell Reaver's abdomen armor. After landing, the Holy Light Gundam mimicked Theon's movements in the cockpit. It lunged forward, turned right on the tip of its left foot, and swung its left arm violently for a second shield bash. Because of its height, the attack still hit the Fell Reaver's abdomen armor. However, unlike the other two Gundams, the shield shone with a brilliant golden light, like the rising sun. Wow, Her Majesty is showing her power. Ever since Duque let his mouth slip, Gavin Rad, who had a loose tongue, also called Theon Her Majesty like Duque did. Theon you? This was King Wa's praise. That's right. Most of the time, the Alliance version of the Gundam was just a piece of armor that made its movements bigger. If it needed long-range attacks or energy output, it could also insert the weapon in its hand into a special slot to enhance its attack power. After all three of them were wielders of divine artifacts. By the way, Gavin Rad's Wind Sword was still the Wind Sword. After Queen Sylvan released Prince Thunderin as her subordinate, she placed the soul fragment of his father, Alakir, into it. Its power was still the same. Theon's Ashbringer was already the strongest holy light amplification device. Suddenly, the holy light burst forth and hit the metal shield like a light cannon. The holy light that was enough to blow up the body of a low-tier Void Lord was condensed into a 2-meter diameter light beam. Then, it aimed at the wound created by the large Ashbringer. Boom! The Fell Reaver's body was directly pierced through. Under the powerful impact, the huge Fell Reaver curled up like a cooked shrimp. In the blink of an eye, Its mountain-like body flew straight up into the sky like a home run in a baseball. It flew straight up to a height of 100 meters before losing its momentum and falling in a parabola. Boom. The heavy body flew to the gravel by the beach and exploded like a shockwave. Sand and gravel flew everywhere. Oh. The Alliance soldiers cheered in amazement. That was not the end. The Golden Gundam leaped high into the air and used the force of the jump to crush the Fell Reaver's head. Poof! The dark power liquid splattered everywhere. It was like the final cry of this huge creature made of dark power. The Fell Reaver's limbs lost power and collapsed into the gravel and mud. Oh! Long live the Alliance! Without needing anyone to say anything, the Alliance soldiers who had been holding back immediately charged again. With the 3 Gundams as the arrowhead, the Alliance successfully established their first beachhead in about an hour. Of course, this temporary base built with 88mm cannons and diesel tanks, as the main firepower was still too weak in front of the Demon Army. In history, in order to fight for the control of strategic locations on the Broken Beach, and even the entire Broken Islands, the Alliance and the Horde almost shed their last drop of blood. The problem was that before the war started, there was no way to enter this area to set up a defense, which made the Alliance and the Horde look more like invaders. Since the commander was changed to Duque, and there was no longer any hindrance from the Horde, Duque, who knew about all this, naturally had a new response. Under the cover of tens of thousands of airships and fleets on the sea, the 2 islands began to slowly cruise toward the Broken Beach. One of the islands was not unfamiliar to everyone. It was one of the Pandorans' nests, Shensi. Chapter 2007. Duque persuaded Old Chen and Xiaohao to let Shenzhen take the risk to participate in the first wave of attack, provided that the Alliance successfully controlled the beachhead. The Pandaren didn't want his old friend to take the risk, but this was a war involving all the creatures in Azeroth. Even the always kind turtle couldn't stay out of it. Therefore, Shenzhen's huge turtle back was full of the Alliance's mechanized troops. 2 full assault tank divisions were the Alliance's killing machine to attack the Burning Legion's position. Almost as soon as Shenzhen approached the Broken Beach and sent out a signal that he couldn't get any closer, the Alliance's engineers quickly put down the trestle that had been prepared in advance and put it on Shenzhen's back all the way to the beach. Tens of thousands of mechanized troops marched on the Broken Beach. Their participation directly suppressed the Burning Legion's counterattack. A large number of armored troops, under the cover of the flying fleet in front, occupied the entire Broken Beach in just 12 hours. This laid a firm foundation for the arrival of the second island. It was a mobile fortress fixed on more than 11,000 pontoons and floating cabins, covering an area of more than 1 square kilometer. Its shape was an octagonal fort up to 9 stories high, and now only had a reinforced concrete foundation structure. Even if the unnecessary structure was repeatedly cut, the total weight still exceeded 36,000 tons. Yes, the Alliance did have flying fortresses like Naxxramas and the Dalajan. But in a supermodern war, the importance of strongholds was self-evident. Naxxramas, which didn't land, was like the sword of Damocles, hanging high above the heads of the demons. Moreover, the flying fortresses also undertook the task of mobile support, so it was best not to use the 2 ready-made flying fortresses as the military fulcrum of the Broken Islands. In history, after the Third Dark Portal, the courageous Dalaran had acted as the forward base in every war, from the world of ice and snow in Northrend to the Broken Archipelago. In this life, Dubois had changed history significantly, so the Dalajan had to bear much less pressure. After the Dalajan moved to the west side of the Broken Beach to act as a barrier, blocking the counterattack of the Flying Apocalypse Guard army, Naxxramas began to help transport the mobile fortress to the Broken Beach. More than 18,000 steel cables hung from the square Naxxramas, and after fixing the cables, they almost hoisted the entire mobile stronghold. It was said to be almost because among the 4 major elemental realms, the Earth Elemental Realm, the only one that did not undertake the task of outer atmosphere defense, had undertaken this advancement. The children and servants of the Stone Mother, Therazane, commanded over 10,000 Earth elementals. They used their sturdy and powerful arms to carry the entire mobile fortress from the shallow waters to the shore. The Earth Elemental Army cast their unique earth magic and flattened the uneven ground on the broken beach in just an hour. The huge fortress came crashing down. Place the prefabricated steel column in the reserved cavity and pour cement over it to seal it. Like a swarm of ants, a large number of carriers on the sea and in the air swarmed to the fortress and covered the fortress with a metal deck and magic protection. Normally speaking, it wouldn't be strange for such a massive fort to take 10 years to build in the olden era. But with the help of Duquesne's modern management methods, black technology, and the extremely magical Earth Elemental Army, the fortress was formed in just 3 days. The Alliance officially named this forward operating base as Fort Courage. That's right. It really took courage to fight against the endless demons of the Burning Legion, with a mortal body. Now it seemed that the entire Alliance did a better job than everyone thought. Sal stood on the side of a 230-meter-long flying battleship and looked at the majestic city 2 kilometers away that seemed to be changing every moment. He felt a lot of emotions. Did you see that? Old friend, I have imagined countless times. If I had suppressed the opposition in the tribe and did not hand over the authority to Gurus, would the tribe still exist? Obviously the answer is no. Wajin came over and glanced at the Frost Wolf flying ship that the Alliance had specially built for Sal, and he also felt emotional. The incomparably majestic flying battleship was equipped with the Alliance's ultimate 460mm cannon, as well as the latest, Eagle Strike, missiles. Unfortunately, the orcs had a natural weakness when it came to operating high-tech weapons. Sal had put in a lot of effort to force this group of guys who would rather charge at the demons with axes and die to receive new knowledge and new weapons. Wajin secretly sighed and said, "The era of the Horde ended 6 years ago. As long as we survive this battle, Azeroth will usher in the era of the Grand Alliance. If we don't want to be destroyed, we should take advantage of the other side's goodwill and become a part of them. I never thought that our decision to join the Alliance was a mistake." Yes. Sal had infinite emotions. The battle between the Alliance and the Burning Legion continued. The Broken Islands in the middle of the endless sea of Azeroth had several huge areas. The Alliance was able to obtain a strategic fulcrum on the Broken Beach, which was the lowest altitude and the most convenient to occupy. This was undoubtedly a very gratifying step. With this Courage Fortress that originally did not exist in history, the Alliance could unscrupulously set up artillery positions in the Broken Beach area. Because of the increasing terrain restrictions of the Broken Islands, the artillery range of the ships on the sea would be greatly affected. This kind of fixed artillery position that could use 800mm railway guns was the favorite of artillerymen. With the initial success of the war, there was also a voice within the Alliance. Ha ha ha. The demons of the Burning Legion are nothing more than this. Counterattack. The Alliance should counterattack into the Twisted Nether and hit the Legion's nest. Most of the people who said this were low-level staff officers who had a good background or family education, had just graduated from military academies, and had a higher starting point than ordinary soldiers. Of course, there were also a few soldiers who took the lead. For this kind of brainless idiot who fooled their own people and encouraged more people to follow them to die, there were too many of them. For example, in World War I, when the British Army first saw machine guns, the brainless British commander felt that he did not send enough soldiers. As a result, he sent more soldiers to die in an attempt to use up the enemy's machine gun bullets with their flesh and blood. For this kind of idiot, Duque directly transferred all the guys who talked nonsense to the Broken Beach front line. Within 3 days, more than half of these idiots died, and then they fell silent. The defending side would always be on the passive side. When the Burning Legion found that the hard bone of Azeroth was as difficult to bite as ever, the entire Legion began to adjust. Chapter 2008. Although it was a dog-eat-dog situation within the army, there were not many truly stupid Void Lords. Those with a bad brain would either be so powerful that they could ignore all plots and schemes, or they would have long since been devoured by the other lords without leaving even their bones behind. After the Burning Legion began to adjust their strategy, the Alliance did not have an easy time. The most obvious was that the void fleet of the army began to use bait. Tens of thousands of modified spaceships that looked like planet destroyers began to attack the defense line in Azeroth. These bait ships had been modified by the Archdemon technicians. Be it the spaceship signal or the appearance, they were extremely realistic. This greatly consumed the energy of the five-color dragons and highly intelligent fire, wind, and water elemental creatures. The enemy spaceships that broke into the atmosphere were not limited to the 6 ambush circles. Even though Duque was prepared and even deployed some of the spaceships to the rear when the front did not need so many spaceships. 36 air fleets with more than 1,000 warships were patrolling the 4 continents, but they still felt exhausted. At the same time, on the Broken Islands, the Alliance's advancement to Asuna, Surima, and Stormfjord was not going well. More fell mechs and Lords of the Abyss appeared on the battlefield. These thick-skinned mechanical creations and great demons were a destructive blow to the ordinary Alliance troops. There were more than 3 Gundams. Duque had customized one for every powerhouse in the Alliance who had reached the hero realm. Only these powerhouses who stood at the top of the Alliance in terms of reflexes and physical fitness could unleash the maximum combat power of the Gundams. As for the rest, due to the shortage of high-strength metal resources and the production capacity of the Mimiron workshop, the Alliance really did not have the ability to make more Gundams. However, Duque was already considering promoting a cheaper version of the Gundam Jim. It was a huge mech that even the elite professions in the Alliance could use, mainly to deal with the Apocalypse guards that were too large in size. On the 7th day of the war, in order to speed up the destruction of the descending planet destroyers, the Alliance finally began to send the god of the wilderness, Arcavon, and the ancient dragons that were transferred back from the void battlefield to Azeroth, such as Krasis, who should have died long ago. The effect of training had long been achieved. However, the fatigue of the soldiers was increasing, and the battle losses were also rising. The more planet destroyers there were, the more army portals opened in Azeroth. Quantitative change could lead to qualitative change. If he didn't want the pressure to accumulate and eventually become the straw that broke the camel's back, he had to reduce the pressure in advance. I don't believe that the Burning Legion's planet destroyer battleships are infinite. Looking at the damage reports flying towards him, Duque cursed in his heart. War was like 2 ferocious beasts tearing each other apart. If the difference in strength was not enough to kill the other in one blow, then it was very likely to become an endless overtime. Either one of them couldn't take it anymore and was killed by the other, and then devoured until not even their bones were left, or both of them were so exhausted that they couldn't fight anymore. Then, they silently shook hands and went back to lick their wounds before fighting again. Just when the battle was at its most stalemate, the first piece of good news finally arrived. Torim contacted Duque excitedly. "Duque, we found Odin." When Duque heard the news, he pretended to be happy and didn't lose a polite smile. Putting aside the fact that this world was also filled with Norse gods on Earth, Duke was already doing them a favor by not creating a Lord Kratos. Just talking about Odin didn't interest Duque at all. That's right, at this point in time, Odin would jump out. 1. The owner of the Sky Fortress, the Warrior's Artifact Hall, in the World of Warcraft game. 2. The final boss of the 5-man instance dungeon Valhalla. 3. The first boss of the Trial of Courage group dungeon. 25,000 years ago, as the most powerful and bravest guardian, Odin was appointed as the chief manager by the Titans. He had the authority to summon Olga to solemnly create Azeroth. While the Guardians were promoting the ceremony to grant the dragon aspects power, Odin was alone in the Hall of Ojua, deep in thought. His colleagues' disobedience to him, the commander-in-chief, made him furious. But what made him even angrier was that he was certain that the dragon aspects would fail to protect the world. To prevent Azeroth from falling to such a state, Odin decided to take care of everything himself. He wanted to create an elite army according to his wishes, an army that could listen to his commands and protect the world when Azeroth was in dire need. And in order to obtain the soldiers of this army, Odin set his sights on the powerful Vrykul. He had always been fond of the Vrykul's innate courage and strength. In Odin's eyes, the Vrykul's warrior soul was incomparable to any other Titan creation. Tyr, the king of order, and the other guardians returned to Ojua and asked Odin to give up this stupid plan. But Odin was unmoved. He was stubborn and believed in his own correctness, but when he invited the other guardians to help him build the army, no one offered a helping hand. Odin expressed that even if he was the only one, he was determined to complete this army. This was why when Duque and the others first attacked Ojua, the guardians said that Odin was missing. In fact, Odin had chosen a side hall of Ojua as the base of his army. After that, in order to separate it from the entire fortress, and even more so from the other guardians, Odin found a witch, Herria, a creation of the Titans that Odin had treated as his goddaughter for a long time. Thus, Herria weaved a powerful spell and enveloped all the strongholds chosen by the guardians. Then, she used all her strength to tear the group of halls that originally belonged to Ojua from the ground and rose straight into the clouds in the sky. Since then, the floating city's reputation as the Hall of Valhalla spread throughout the world. Odin occupied the top of the fortress and loudly announced his intentions to all the Vrykul. Those who died heroically and gloriously on the battlefield would be able to be reborn in the Hall of Valhalla, and the bodies obtained by their souls would be forged by an even more powerful storm. These warriors, these Verigars, would be the top guardians of Azeroth, and their achievements would forever be remembered in the hearts of all Titan creations. Now what was lacking was a way to send souls to the Hall of Valhalla. For this, Odin studied the energy dissipated in the Kingdom of Shadows, and thus mastered the method to transform some of the Vrykul into spirits. This was the method to create Verigar. Chapter 2009. These Vagri were spectral servants that could travel between the nation of shadows and the real world, and were used to guide the soul of Vrykul to the Valhalla. However, if they became Vagri, it meant that they would have to bear the curse of being an illusion for all eternity. But no Vrykul was willing to sacrifice themselves to become Vagri, so Odin decided to take action by force and turn the Titan creation into a slave. However, this incurred Herria's rebuke. The dispute between the two grew increasingly intense, and the enraged Odin almost fought with Herria. In the end, Herria could only warn Odin that if he was still stubborn, she would return the Valhalla to Odin. To Odin, Herria's disobedience did not only threaten his plan, but also the safety of all of Azeroth. Odin, who had been overwhelmed by the fantasy of the Martyr's Palace, extended his hand towards the witch. Odin first shattered her physical form, then twisted her soul. Thus, the first Vagri in history was born. For a time, Herria's cries of pain and anger rumbled across the land of Azeroth, resounding straight into the center of the Nation of Shadows. This violent transformation caused Herria to be eternally depressed, but her suffering did not end there. Even though she hated Odin for his actions, she could not go against his will. Thus, under the latter's orders, many Vrykul who had no intention of doing so were turned into the cursed Vagri. For a long time, Herria and her Vagri colleagues led the heroic soul of Vrykul to the Valhalla, and the storm-infused Varair could be seen everywhere in the walled city. And it was Odin himself who gave them power and guided their training. Whether it was breaking off with the Guardians or turning Herria into Vagri, he never felt the slightest bit of regret. To Odin, everything he did was for the safety of Azeroth, and to pay his utmost respect to the great pantheon. Well, that's right. Odin of Azeroth was similar to the god King Odin that Duque knew from Norse mythology on Earth. They were both rather annoying. I don't want to give a **T about him. If there was something, she would try to ignore him if she could. Duque even had a feeling that if he could deal with the Burning Legion, he might even have to go to war with this fellow. Based on the current situation, this guy's strength was still indispensable. This was because his existence represented assistance from the Pantheon Temple, and it was also the sign of the era of picking up divine artifacts anywhere. The opening of a new hall for all professions was the key to upgrading the divine equipment. However, Duque rolled his eyes at the god of thunder. Torim, we've known each other for so long. Don't you have anything to say to me? Torim, who had never learned how to shrink, always maintained his giant form. He touched his big nose awkwardly. How much do you know? A lot. Mimiron told me of Odin, but I still want to hear your version. A person who played with lightning could easily become a straightforward person after a long period of time. Queen Shi did not count. Her job was to be the wind. Although Tarim was embarrassed, he still confessed a lot of things. Basically, he knew almost the same as what Duque knew. Finally, he concluded. Although we Guardians have had unpleasant experiences working with Odin in the past, Odin will not be careless in the face of a great enemy like the Burning Legion. He is still a Guardian at heart. Duque pretended to think for a while, then called William over. William, I have a mission for you. After hearing this, William was a little speechless. Uncle Duque, isn't it better for you to do this kind of thing? Odin is the chief of the Guardians, right? Duque shrugged. Odin is straightforward and doesn't like to work with others, let alone listen to others' commands in battle. And I heard from Tarim that he is a pure warrior. He will probably get along better with you as a warrior. William was middle-aged and still a little hot-tempered. This had a lot to do with the fact that he had fused with Goldrin's soul fragment, which was equivalent to half a wolf god. But after being in a high position for a long time, he had also matured. He immediately sensed that Duque had a strange dislike, or perhaps resentment towards Odin, so William did not pursue the matter. After knowing Duque for 30 years, he also understood his temper. If he did not say anything, no one could force him. Then, what if Odin asks why you didn't come? What will you say? Duque rolled his eyes. Just say that because the highest guardian of Odin disappeared, I was busy cleaning up the mess of those unreliable pentashade dragons. I was busy intercepting the Burning Legion's starships in the void battlefield, and could not leave. Hearing this, Tarim and William both choked. After going around in circles, wasn't he still scolding Odin? Was this Odin's fault? Duque was really mean. Tarim's face turned red too. In the beginning, it was Odin who insisted on giving power to the dragon aspects. In the end, it was the dragon aspects and the pentashade dragons who shouldered the responsibility of protecting this world for 25,000 years. On the surface, it seemed like the pentashade dragons were unreliable, but everyone knew that the dragon aspects could not have done better in the consecutive battles, including the Cataclysm. Duque was obviously belittling the Dragon Slumber Shrine and trampling on Odin. Tarim glanced at William, who understood tacitly and returned a look. I understand. I'll just say the second half of what Duque said. No one knew that Duque had an even deeper grudge. What the hell? Why was it that in The Return of the Legion, the warrior class hall was ascending to the heavens, while the other class halls were entering? The warriors were like immortals ascending, flying to the firmament shrine. When they turned back, they all looked like comets falling to the ground. They had the aura of a deity descending to the mortal world. Compared to the warrior profession hall, the other profession halls were at least one level lower. Duque also understood that the profession hall had to be in line with the identity of the profession, but the difference in quality was too great. The Guardian Temple of the Mages and the Chapel of the Holy Light for the Paladins were still passable. The pitiful bandits had to go to the sewers, and the Warlock Hall affected the appearance of the city. However, the warlocks and bandits had little to do with Duque. After deciding that William would appear, the rest was to set it up. Tarim continued to narrate the story. We, the Guardians, knew that Odin and his adopted daughter, Hela, had been at odds for a long time, but due to Odin's authority, Hela did not immediately take revenge until the traitorous Guardian Loken found Hela. Hela created the underworld abyss not far from the Hall of Heroes, and used all the means she could think of to take revenge on Odin. Hela's kingdom controlled the souls of the weak, and through a series of actions such as the creation of Kvarder and the formation of the elite Helagar, they fought against Odin's subordinate, Wagri. Chapter 2010. Tarim continued. Ever since Loken's betrayal, Odin has been imprisoned in the Hall of Heroes. Hela has been plotting in the shadows to seize the soul of his Varigar warriors. But recently, we received a message from Odin again. Odin is gathering mortal warriors for a final test, hoping that their strength and determination can turn the situation around and end Hela's rule. The underworld purgatory is only the first step of Hela's plot. She intends to eradicate Odin and obtain the soul of the Varigar warriors. So, our mission this time is not only to rescue Odin but also to defeat Hela. At this moment, Duque interrupted. This mission is very important because Mimiron told me that Odin seems to have a special way of charging divine weapons that can allow most weapons with divine weapon quality to be charged and upgraded to a higher level of divine weapons. I think this will greatly strengthen the combat power of the professionals in the Alliance. At this point, Varian's eyes lit up shockingly. Duque had long predicted an era where divine weapons were everywhere. Back then, Duque had analyzed it from the perspective of star souls. Things like, I've read all the ancient books in Karazhan, and discovered that when a planet's star soul was destroyed by the Burning Legion, it even made a powerhouse who had just stepped into the hero realm become a true god. Although these theories made everyone feel good, deep down they still did not believe them. If it was not Duque who came up with this theory, it would most likely be taken as boasting. Divine weapons were everywhere, and purple equipment was not even comparable to dogs. Would such a good thing really exist? When this day was about to come, it was actually quite exciting. How could 1 or 2 divine weapons be enough? Who did not want to have a full set of divine weapons? Looking at the excited Varian, Duque's mouth twitched. Although he was already a demigod, he could not avoid it. Mages and demigods were extremely powerful, but in contrast, the physique of mages was so weak that they were even weaker than ordinary hero warriors. Back then, Medivh as a demigod mage had also died. As long as one did not activate a magic shield or magic armor, and remove the elemental transformation in one's body, stabbing a demigod mage to death would be a piece of cake. How could they be like the thick-skinned defense warriors, who could still jump around like pigs after being shot? Mages were a contradictory combination of extreme power and unimaginable fragility. However, William was enough to deal with Odin. Duque couldn't be bothered to play the game of allies with Odin, who was a little crazy. Time passed quickly. The allied forces formed by the Alliance and the Guardians formed a tug-of-war with the Burning Legion. The army began to work hard to prevent the assault ships and planet destroyers from entering the Alliance's encirclement. This increased the pressure on the 2 geosynchronous satellite fortresses on the Void battlefield. Overall, the number of demonic warships entering Azeroth had decreased in late April, but they had spread more widely. Even when Duque had sent out half of the reserve fleet that he had been holding back, to split the Alliance's starships into 36 fleets, it still felt like a mess. The demons charged at the Alliance without any regard for their lives. The Alliance had to pay a heavy price for every meter they advanced on the Broken Islands. By the middle of April, the number of Alliance soldiers dying in battle had exceeded 10,000. By the end of the month, the number had risen to 30,000. On April 22nd, more than 500,000 Alliance soldiers had died since the start of the war. And at this moment, Duque suddenly felt his heart palpitate. He was in the command center of Naxxramas, and Duque was dreaming. There was only one being in the entire world that could make a demigod daydream, and forcibly pull his soul into a dream for a short period of time. The Dragon King of the Emerald Dream, Isra. Isra's usually soft voice had a rare hint of anxiety. Duque, something's wrong. The Emerald Dream has been contaminated by an unknown force. Even Cenarius is not normal. Come and help me. You're the only one in this world who can help me. Duque shuddered. Wait, isn't the King of Nightmares Savi's dead? No, it doesn't look like Savi's. I'm very familiar with his soul and the waves of the dream. In the dream, the human form of Isra bit his lips, his face even twitching slightly in pain. Don't pull my spirit. I need to go back and confirm something. Give me 5 minutes. Okay. The next moment, the scene in front of him suddenly receded like the tide. A stream of light flashed, and Duque found himself sitting in the command seat again. Duque, what's wrong? Jaina was the most anxious. I'm fine, but something has happened to the Emerald Dream. Isra just asked me for help. Duque's words shocked the surrounding Alliance bigwigs. With doubts, Duque opened his right hand and took out a divine artifact from the space he had condensed with his own power, the Tear of Elun. Duque narrowed his eyes. Something was wrong. If this was the original history, the King of Nightmares Savi's, who should have died and been revived again and again, once again using nightmares to contaminate the Emerald Dream. Many druids were corrupted by the nightmares, and even Cenarius could not escape the corruption. Malfurion Stormrage had lost his mind because Cenarius had been corrupted by the king of nightmares Savis, so he went after Savis alone. Isra was worried about Malfurion's safety and followed closely behind. However, everything was a trap set by Savis. Savis caught Malfurion and used the corrupted divine artifact, the Tear of Elun, to hit Isra, who was rushing over. The corrupted Tear of Elun entered Isra's body and corrupted him. Then, Savis took Malfurion away, and allowed the corrupted Isra to destroy the Moon Temple. Tyrant Whisperwind, who arrived late, had a difficult choice to stop the corrupted Isra first and save Malfurion later. With the help of a group of mortal heroes, the corrupted Isra was defeated. Before he died, the moon emitted a beautiful light like a miracle and took away Isra's soul. Thus, the dragon aspect Isra had fallen. Unlike the annoying Malygos and the arrogant Nozdormu, Isra had always been a positive character. As a dragon girl, she was very popular among the players. During the Return of the Legion period, Isra's death made countless players sad. After knowing each other for so many years, Duque had saved so many people and changed the fates of so many people who were supposed to die. He had even saved Nozdormu, so of course he would not leave Isra behind. He had beaten the crap out of Savis in advance and destroyed his soul. He had even persuaded Elun to let Isra give him the Tear of Elun. It could be said that under normal circumstances, there was no possibility of Isra being corrupted again. What the hell was going on in the Emerald Dream? What was going on? Chapter 2011. Magni, I have an important mission for you. With that, Duque handed the Tear of Elun to Magni Bronzebeard, who was glowing with a blinding diamond light. I'm going to the Emerald Dream. During this time, keep it safe for me. The Tear of Elun, one of the pillars of creation, cannot be lost. Magni stretched out his hand and took the artifact. As soon as he closed his sparkling diamond palm, everyone could see that his diamond arm had become almost transparent. The red solid artifact teardrop had actually passed through his arm and reached his heart. The big shots were dumbfounded. Magni's gaze swept across everyone. I'm sorry. I'm just a demigod of the earth. I'm not like a certain demigod of the elements and a certain goddess of the wind, who can still act like humans even after stepping into the divine realm. Everyone burst into laughter. Queen Sylvanas connected telepathically. Duque, I know. Duque, of course, knew that there must be a reason behind this anomaly. If it was just a routine attack, Duque wouldn't be afraid at all. However, this inexplicable attack was a bit of a headache. The history of Azeroth had long been riddled with holes by Duque. Some events, rather than fate, were more like the same choices that a certain leader with a fixed personality would definitely make at a fixed point in time. However, many events had already become untraceable. For example, Onyxia should have been dead long ago. She would at most turn into a zombie once before completely disappearing from the stage of history. Who knew that she would still be fighting in the Void battlefield with the title of a dragon aspect? Another example would be William. At this point in time, William should be dead as well. However, with Duque's command, William had directly escaped death at the Shattered Beach. He was still the core and soul of the Alliance. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be a card like King of Nightmares Savis. This was different from Enzos's previous strategy. It was equivalent to a direct attack now. If it was in the game, Emerald Nightmare would only be a transitional dungeon. Those who needed to beat people up, and those who needed to push the boss. Apart from countless players cursing the glass scum for killing our beautiful Isra, the Jade Nightmare was no different from other group dungeons. The Azeroth in the real world had a completely different significance to the Emerald Dream. The Emerald Dream was originally the blueprint of the Azeroth created by the Titans, but now, under the stimulation of the mysterious power of the unknown origin, the spreading corruption was now gushing out. If it could not be stopped at its source, the entire Azeroth would be surrounded by it. Duque knew very well what would happen if the Emerald Dream turned into an Emerald Nightmare. When the nightmare expanded infinitely, All the mortals in Azeroth would be trapped by it. They would pass out on the floor and have nightmares. What would happen if the Burning Legion's invasion was like a raging fire, and all the Alliance soldiers of the Resistance Legion fell asleep from nightmares at the same time? Team wipe. Big Brother. Needless to say, only by defeating the one who was the source of the corruption in the Emerald Dream would they be able to see the pure Emerald Dream again. If the other Alliance powerhouses went, they would have to work twice as hard for half the results. Their background meant that they had limited knowledge. When it came to knowledge, no one could compare to a transmigrator from the Great Celestial Empire. Duke had arranged the work on the front line. After handing over most of the task of remotely controlling the Void Fortress above the atmosphere to Khadgar and the other elemental emissaries, he directly lay down in his bedroom in Naxxramuz's commander's mansion. He ordered his handmaidens Vanessa and Solarian. I'll probably have nightmares and scream. As long as I don't wantonly attack the surrounding Alliance leaders, don't worry even if I tear down the commander's mansion. Vanessa was a little troubled. Then, when I sleep, don't let anything near me, not even my wives. Because in terms of power, the spirit can actually be unified with the material. When the spirit is completely materialized, the enemy can also become someone by my side, with her voice and smile. Duque emphasized, even though he thought that he might be thinking too much. It was better to be safe than sorry. Ever since he had transmigrated, he had persevered for so many years, and he was just one step away. No matter what, he could not fail at this time of the army's return. Duque arranged everything, laid down comfortably and called out softly, Izura. Almost in the next moment, he felt as if his spirit had encountered a black hole, and a great suction force came from the illusion, about to pull his soul out of his divine body. Of course, if Duque wanted to resist, the other party would definitely not succeed. A demigod against a demigod would at most be a distraction. After verifying that it was Izura himself and that he was not corroded, Duque let go of his spirit, allowing Izura to pull his soul. In the blink of an eye, Duque found himself in a strange, blurry, and terrifying world. The sky was red, but it was covered in a thick layer of dust. Countless buildings in the distance, as well as the huge land below, were lifted into the air by huge vines. Once upon a time, the Emerald Dream was a vibrant green. Even though there were all kinds of unreal illusions, it was always filled with a beautiful feeling. It was as if as long as he closed his eyes, he could sit in all kinds of beautiful dreams and soar in an absolutely perfect world. Now all that came to his nose was a rotten smell, like a piece of fat pork that was bought and thrown in a corner for a week, emitting the kind of rotten smell that cockroaches and mice loved. Ugh. It was just a feeling, but Duque felt like retching. Duque, you promised me 5 minutes. Izura's soft voice came. Duque turned around, embarrassed, and then got a shock. Old friends. Whether it was her dragon form or her night elf form, Izura always gave people a feeling of elegance and beauty. But the Izura that appeared in front of Duque was extremely weak. The Izura in her night elf form couldn't even stand steadily. Half of her body was leaning on a withered blood-red vine. Night elves always dressed boldly. Most female elves liked to not wear armor between their breastplate and belt, because it made it lighter and allowed their skin to feel the power of the moon goddess. But the Izura at this moment, the right side of her exposed waist was like a tattoo of the worst kind. It was like using the worst heavy metal paint to pierce into the dermis, leaving a color of corrosion on it. Damn, why didn't you call me earlier? I did. I thought of you the moment I got hit. This is, about 8 minutes in the real world. Izura smiled bitterly, but that smile was uglier than crying. Chapter 2012. It would be a lie to say that Duque's heart did not ache when he said that Izura was seriously injured. His facial muscles twitched as he looked at Izura, half of her body in a corroded state. Duque said, "How did it corrode you? Close the tunnel." "No way." Izura panicked. "My soul has already completely fused with the Emerald Dream. The corrosion of the Emerald Dream is equivalent to the corrosion of my soul. We must first find the source of the corrosion and destroy it." She was interrupted by Duque. "Don't lie to yourself. At this rate, You will be corroded before we find and destroy the source of the corrosion. Do you want to be the third dragon aspect to be destroyed because of the corruption? Duque said. My duty. The Titan gave you the duty to protect the Emerald Dream. In other words, as long as the Emerald Dream is fine, it doesn't matter whether you will be corrupted or not. Am I right? After knowing them for so long, Duque had figured out the personalities of these dragon aspects. With that, Izura was immediately speechless. Stupid woman. Immediately disconnect your soul from the Emerald Dream. If not, I don't know if the Emerald Dream can be saved, but you definitely can't. But. Izura felt wronged. Her brothers and sisters were still fighting in their own fields. Alexstrasza was busy presiding over the void battlefield. Nozdormu was using the little divine power of space and time to resist the invasion of the Burning Legion from other timelines. Letting go Dan Ogul Dan come over was already a dereliction of duty. Nozdormu would definitely not allow more demons to come from other timelines. In the end, the one who could help was an outsider like Duque. While Izura was hesitating, the corrosion continued to spread. In the time it took to talk, it was no longer just at her waist. It seemed to be spreading up to her ribs and chest. Stupid. Don't you understand? You're not a dragon aspect that you were born with. You're just a native dragon that has gained sentience. The Titan caught you to work. As long as you haven't abandoned your duty. As Duque spoke, he actually pressed his hand on Izura's rotten abdomen. Not because her body was touched, but because she was shocked to find that Duque was trying to seize control of the Emerald Dream. Izura suddenly understood everything. Duque, what are you doing? Izura screamed, and in his panic, even tears came out of the corners of his eyes. No, you can't do that. I know you mean well, but if you really want to corrupt and degenerate, I alone am enough. Azeroth should not have lost 2 demigods of the righteous side in one day. Izura's words stunned Duque. This is really kind-hearted. However, this also strengthened Duque's confidence in saving her. Enough! Duque roared like an enraged lion. Didn't you find me because you knew that I could save you and the Emerald Dream? I'm coming. I also have a way. Do as I say, so that we don't have to corrupt and can survive. You stupid woman, since you chose to believe me, then believe me to the end. He scolded Izura so fiercely that she lost her mind. Where's the password? I'm asking for the password to turn off the connection. In that moment of distraction, Duque had already invaded her spiritual world and shouted. Subconsciously, Izura replied in dragon language. Then a second later, this strange and blurry nightmare world let out an extremely unpleasant hissing sound. It was impossible to describe what kind of creature this was. It only felt like some kind of carnivorous ferocious creature that failed at the last moment when its prey was about to be caught. Hoo. Both of them collapsed on the ground and looked at each other, a little dazed. Cutting off the connection with the dream and losing control of the entire giant dream space, they avoided the rapid expansion of the corrosion, but the already corroded areas still did not lessen. The stain on Izura's abdomen was still spreading at a relatively fast speed. Duque, your hand. Izura screamed in shock because she saw that Duke's right hand was also tainted by the colorful soul-corroding poison, just like her abdomen. It was indeed a small piece of corrosion. Izura subconsciously believed that she had caused Duque to be hopeless. Duque, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Even you were infected. I'm sorry, I only thought of you in the most critical moment. I didn't want you to fall with me. I'm sorry. Izura sat on the ground in pain. At this moment, how she wished that the pain in her body could surpass the guilt in her heart. If she died, it was enough for her, and she even harmed others. She cried out loud, which was rare. She did not expect the Emerald Dragon King, who had lived for at least 25,000 years, to have such a fragile side. Duque gently lifted Izura's sharp chin and wiped away the tears at the corner of her eyes. He smiled and said, "The one who should be sorry is me. I should have shared a secret with you earlier. All right, now it's time to witness a miracle." Under Izura's stunned gaze, Duque's right hand became more illusory, and after a few seconds, it turned into a complete spiritual body. Then Duque slowly reached his right hand into Izura's abdomen, as if pulling a piece of gauze, only to see large patches of spiritual corrosion being pulled by Duque, from Izura's abdomen to Duque's hand. The tearing pain from the depths of her soul made Izura bend over in pain, but the continuous corrosion pain, which was 10,000 times more painful than the pain of the nerves, was clearly reducing. Wait. Duque, this kind of corrosion can't be purified by the power of light. It would be strange if Izura was not touched that Duque took the initiative to bear her pain. Aside from being touched, she was also deeply worried. She was familiar with Duque, but they were definitely not the kind of relationship where she could entrust her life to him. An ally doing this for her made Izura's heart, which had been sealed for a long time, feel a little strange. How long had it been? Maybe 10 seconds, or a few hours, or a few days. In this strange world that had lost the concept of time, and had become an emerald nightmare, Izura could not figure it out at all. She only knew that her heart was placed on the great man in front of her, who had become a god as a mortal. Duque did try to purify it, but he soon gave up. Izura quickly realized what was different about Duque. His soul arm was not like an arm, but more like the detachable arm of a doll that human children often played with. Without surgery or magic, Duque simply twisted a small part of the skin on his arm that was still intact. Then a large part of his soul arm was removed just like that. Chapter 2013. It was thrown to the side like trash. In midair, Duque raised his left hand and chanted, "Destroy." A huge fireball that looked like a pyroblast appeared out of thin air and burned the entire rotten soul arm into ashes. Izura was dumbfounded. She was completely dumbfounded. Yes, my soul is special. I can use my main soul to assimilate the soul and soul fragments that have lost their owners, turning them into a part of me. As for cutting souls, I learned it from the Burning Legion when I was undercover. I think you won't blame me. Duque's smile was light, but his confidence gave Izura a different feeling. I won't. Halfway through her sentence, Izura, who was about to stand up, felt her legs turn to jelly. She fell into Duque's arms. I'm sorry, my legs are jelly. Izura realized that this was the day she had apologized the most in all her years of life. She was extremely weak. Other than Duque, who could increase or decrease souls at will, any normal being would be greatly weakened if their soul was damaged. Take a break. Duque patted Izura's back lightly. He suddenly empathized with her. If his power dropped and he became the useless transmigrator who had just arrived at the Elven Forest, he probably wouldn't be able to accept it either. Strength, glory, status, and power. Once you had these things, you would never want to lose them. Unfortunately, a boat sailing against the current would either advance or retreat. Duque had no way out. Izura shook her head resolutely. Feeling the stubbornness in Izura's eyes, Duque didn't try to persuade her anymore. He smiled calmly. Follow me. If you're really afraid of getting lost, then pull my sleeve. I promise you, I'll return you a pure emerald dream. She didn't know where Duque's confidence came from. She was clearly the supreme ruler of this dream world. But Izura realized that at this moment, she actually trusted Duque more than she trusted herself. Was it Duque's miraculous feats that made all the forces of justice feel that Duque was omnipotent? Or was it that Duque's strength had long since surpassed the imagination of all existences? Perhaps, this was the trust that came with actual achievements. Izura followed behind Duque quietly like an obedient wife, one hand holding onto the tail of Duque's robe. Wait, this plot isn't right. Why did it feel like he was on a kindergarten bus? Duque grimaced and stammered. Actually, I don't need to cast spells to launch my strongest attack. Oh, Izura seemed to be in a daze. She had been tugging at the corner of her robe, probably because she was afraid that it would affect Duque. But now you're holding my arm like you're distributing dog food on the street with your boyfriend. And your movements are so precise. What's the meaning of this? What? This isn't suitable? Izura's strength was greatly reduced, so she didn't need to close her eyes to suppress her power. At this moment, she blinked her large, cute eyes. That innocent look made Duque's face bleed. No, it's just... Sorry, I actually don't have much interaction with humans. I spend most of my time in the Emerald Dream. The people I knew before were all druids. They were too respectful to me, and I didn't know what expression to use to face them. I couldn't even talk to them. Duque was speechless. Was Izura an otaku? The human I talk to the most is you. I've seen you talk to other women like this. Duque rolled his eyes. They're all my wives. Partners? Partners in the dragon race are very loose. I don't really understand you humans. Izura said this, but she couldn't help hugging Izura tightly. Feeling the elasticity of Dragon's Peak, Duque really didn't know what expression to use to face Izura. She was a dragon. She was a dragon. This self-hypnosis was completely useless, especially after Duke had slapped Onyxia. He didn't think it was a problem at all. He suddenly wanted to die. Completely despairing, Duque decided to temporarily cut off the sensation on his left arm. For an elemental demigod with an elemental body, this was a small matter. Phew. Letting out a long breath, Duque calmed down. Izura was surprised to find that the scenery around him was changing at a high speed. You know how the power of the Emerald Dream works? Just a little. Duque's humility seemed more like pretentious in the eyes of the dragoness. The scenery in front of him quickly dissolved. The dark red scene that was originally like a monster baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, no matter if it was the giant walls, the withered trees, or the layers of black ground that looked like solidified magma. All of them were like candles being roasted by fire, disintegrating in front of Duke with a scream. A ball of black ink suddenly came out of nowhere. Even though Duque had activated his ice shield, this mysterious evil substance easily passed through Duque's defense and poured onto Duque's body. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. It was like the smell of burnt meat. Miraculously, Duque didn't seem to notice it at all. One of the puddles of black water had already melted half of Duke's face. Half of his skin was gone, revealing his terrifying teeth and muscles that were constantly melting. Even though he knew that this was also a part of the Emerald Nightmare, Izura still frowned. Who knew that in the next second, a green light suddenly flashed. Izura was very sure that in the black curtain covering Duque's face, a large number of green bean-sized numbers poured down from top to bottom, 0 and 1. In the blink of an eye, the damage on Duque's face had healed without any damage. Not even a scar was left. How did you do it? Izura was shocked. It's nothing. I just understood the principles of the Emerald Dream from another angle. Usually the world we know is a purely physical world with a physical shape. But the line between the physical and the spiritual in the world of Azeroth is not as clear as mortals think. Yes. Izura nodded. The Emerald Dream is the blueprint that the Titans left for the Azeroth. It is also a special space that can perfectly merge the spiritual and the physical, allowing the spiritual to materialize in the form of a physical object at any time. As long as we know this, it will be easy. As he spoke, Duque waved his hand. An exaggerated light shield the size of a football field enveloped him and Izura. Whether it was the storm outside, the volcanic eruption, or the destruction of the stars, it did not affect the world inside the light shield at all. The so-called corrosion is to change the victim's mind in this world where the spiritual can materialize, tampering with the victim's memory, making the victim think that their soul has really been corroded and destroyed. When the victim believes all of this in their mind, then the victim is really finished. Chapter 2014. But no matter who it is, it's impossible to not be affected here. Izura said with absolute certainty. I'm affected. Duque tapped his temple and then grabbed with his fingers. His right hand, which had become translucent, grabbed and pulled out an illusory human skin that looked exactly like his face. No, it wasn't human skin. It was like a three-dimensional projection of Duque's appearance. For a moment, Izura thought that Duque was playing with a magic mirror. She immediately confirmed that it was also a spiritual fragment with soul material. I've made my spiritual see into a layered spherical defense system. Every time a layer is contaminated by the Jade Nightmare, I'll abandon this layer of spiritual shield. Izura froze on the spot and then said, but you'll still be damaged. Yes. As long as I stay here, I'll be constantly attacked by the entire nightmare world. So I'm trying to find the fulcrum of this world, or rather, replace the attacker behind the scenes as the core of the source of corrosion. You can find it. Izura was surprised. It's not that I can, but I've already found it. Come. Duque turned to the left, and Izura hurriedly followed. Duque slowly stepped on the somewhat illusory scarlet ground, but the scenery in front of him changed 10 times in a second. Duque's left hand pressed lightly into the void, and one huge landscape after another melted like wax in front of the man and dragon, disappearing into the void. The scene changed. Soon, the shadow of a towering giant tree appeared in front of them. This is Dashiel? Izura was a little stunned. Duque raised his head slightly. What Dashiel? It was actually the world tree planted by a group of night elf druids, one after another, one after another. After the Battle of the Ancients 10,000 years ago, Azeroth changed dramatically, and the continent of ancient Kalimdor exploded. The druid survivors on the Broken Isles wanted to use the method of planting the world tree to cure Azeroth, so they planted Dashiel in Vulsala. Before the arrival of the Legion, although the Broken Archipelago was surrounded by the power of the Great Maelstrom, Dashiel had always existed on the Broken Archipelago in peace. The Alliance had yet to conquer Surlama, let alone Dashiel, who was in the Black Heart Forest in the northwest corner of the Broken Islands. However, in the Azeroth spiritual blueprint of the Emerald Dream, Dashiel was safe and sound. At this moment, Izura saw a dragon. Her face turned pale, and she mumbled in a dreamy voice, Nasandra. Duque was also sighing. Nasandra used to be the protector of the World Tree, Sharadasil, in the Emerald Dream. As a member of the Green Dragon Army, when this mysterious corruption nightmare engulfed Dahil in the dream, this sleeping guardian was also corroded and engulfed. The current Nasandra was just an afterimage of the past. She was trapped in the plague, and was ready to devour any fool who dared to enter her lair. Roar! It was a furious roar. The shadow of the green dragon could no longer be seen on this giant dragon. The once beautiful green scales had now turned into a deathly pale gray substance. It looked like it could be weathered at any moment, and then collapse on the spot. Izura pursed her lips. This made her feel very uncomfortable because this nightmare dragon reminded her of herself as an ancestor dragon. Nasandra felt the presence of a threat. She spat out dirty saliva as soon as she appeared. Although she wanted to define it as dragon breath, it was too disgusting. The green, sticky liquid was mixed with a large number of large and small insect limbs. It smelled worse than the rancid water that pigs ate. This was also a type of corrosive spit. Duque reached out his hand, and a translucent purple-blue arcane wall immediately appeared above their heads. He pointed his finger forward, and a hand of magic the size of a tank appeared out of thin air. With a push, the arcane wall immediately moved forward. The swooping rotting breath was like a baseball that was hit back in the air. There was a clatter in the air, and it bounced back at an even faster speed. Nasandra had no time to dodge, and was directly hit by her own rotting breath. This made her, who no longer had much rationality left, a little dazed. As a standing beginner boss, Nasandra's special skills were really nothing special. If it was a country bumpkin at the time of the Burning Crusade, perhaps her rotting breath would cause enough confusion for a mortal hero. But that was all. Duque, don't torture her. Let her rest in peace. Even if this is already her afterimage. Izura pleaded. Okay. Duque raised his finger and more arcane walls appeared around Nasandra. This was to prevent her from spitting out and launching corrosive attacks. Roar! Nasandra bared her fangs and claws, trying to use the rhinoceros-like horn on her dragon head to break through the arcane walls. Unfortunately, Duque turned his wrist and immediately an arcane rope of light that was at least 3 people wide appeared around her. It wrapped around her 2 hind legs in an instant. Bang! Accompanied by a loud noise, she fell to the ground awkwardly. She let out a bestial scream. At this time, countless green beetles the size of 3-wheeled motorcycles began to crawl out from the ground in all directions. They let out rustling sounds and surged towards Duque and Izura like a tidal wave. Duque snapped his fingers. An ice storm immediately rose. There was a series of continuous ping-ping-pang-pang, Sounds similar to glass shattering. Looking diagonally above their heads, they saw countless snow-white chunks of ice being flung away. Hundreds and thousands of large beetles were instantly turned into ice sculptures. Then even more ice elements covered them, turning them into ice cubes. In the end, they were crushed into ice in midair by the ice storm. With Duque and Isra in the center, it was like a crystal rain in a diameter of 30 meters. Countless ice crystals that were the limbs of the beetles fell down and formed a layer of ice and snow on the ground. At this time, Isra was shocked to find that Nisandra had stopped moving. The huge dragon body had turned into a huge ice sculpture. It seemed that only in this state could Isra find the beautiful shadow of his former subordinate in the past. Crack! The ice sculpture shattered. The huge dragon made of ice completely exploded into tens of thousands of irregular pieces of different sizes. It's over. Isra was still in disbelief. Yes. No pain. This was not a battle of the same level. There was nothing to brag about in itself. However, after the ice sculpture shattered, a bright orange light attracted Duque's attention. This is, in Azeroth, orange only represented one type of equipment artifact. Chapter 2015. Duque had forgotten how long it had been since he had last upgraded his equipment. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but that he couldn't. Ever since he had become a Breaking Dawn wizard, there were very few pieces of equipment that suited him. The equipment of Pharaoh from the world of Azeroth strengthened a wizard's strength in the form of additional magic circuits. For Duque, it was better not to have equipment that gave too little bonuses. After all, his movements would be even more restricted if he had more equipment. Pharaoh's powerful destructive power and fragile body were the most extreme contrast in the world. If he couldn't use magic to defend himself, he would die if he was hit by an enemy of the same level. This was especially so for Duque, who had transcended and entered the divine realm. If it wasn't a divine weapon, then everything else could only be used as decoration. Return of the Legion was also the time when planet Azeroth's self-defense consciousness was completely awakened. It would distribute the stored energy of the planet to those who were willing to protect it. This belt that was flashing with a holy orange glow was the most typical example. Duque was very sure that before the Burning Legion came, this item was definitely an epic-grade equipment in Nissandra's hands. Duque had been calling the planet's will, but he didn't get a response. She must be hesitating. Duque could understand that a true god at least held some supreme authority on this planet. Once the will of Azeroth was transferred, it couldn't be taken back. The consequences could be extremely serious, so heavy that even planet Azeroth itself couldn't bear it. Duque wasn't in a hurry. Anyway, before the planet confirmed that Sargeras had arrived, she had to give it to him no matter what. If Azeroth didn't give it to him, Duque wouldn't fight for it either. He would just be a quiet, handsome man. However, this belt was obviously a little reward for him. With a wave of his hand, the belt that was supported by the arcane elemental hand immediately flew into Duke's hand. The moment his palm touched the orange belt, a description popped up in his retina. Eternal belt. The magic contained on it seems to be endless, just like the Burning Legion. It was simple violence and had no numerical value. In reality, equipment at the artifact level could no longer be quantified in terms of numbers. Just like the Atish, Guardian's legendary staff, that Duque was holding, if it was in the game, it would have been used as a decoration because its attributes could not keep up. Or it would have been used to open a Karazhan portal to trap his teammates. But in this life, Duque had been using this drumstick, and he didn't feel like he couldn't keep up at all. A divine artifact that was suitable for oneself would bring a huge boost to any existence. Ah, it's a divine artifact. Isra was also a little surprised. This proves that Azeroth is getting anxious too. Duque took off the decorative belt that Aurelia sewed for him, and put on the ribbon of eternity. The belt was blue in color, and there were 3 buckles that were connected together. In terms of aesthetics, this thing did not pass. In terms of effectiveness, Duque had to give it full marks. The ribbon of eternity, which was based on the Titan rune system, had power beyond Duque's imagination. It was true that Duque could connect to the weave, And in theory, as long as the 4 elemental realms of Azeroth were not destroyed, he had endless magic power. But in reality, it could not be calculated this way. Arcane magic, which was the Titan rune energy, was the basis for Duque to balance the various elements. What limited Duque's elemental magic was the arcane energy that could not be borrowed or absorbed. The Ribbon of Eternity was of course a little useless to the players in the game. After all, the special effect that required magic power to be less than 25% of the total was quite a pain in the ass. But in Duque's hands, it was a completely different concept. With the Ribbon of Eternity, Duque could directly control the total magic power of his demigod body by as much as 11%, which was quite a shocking number. This was not the limit. I'll charge it when I get out. As a peak demigod, Pharaoh did not need to slowly accumulate energy for something as simple as charging a divine weapon. If he was not in the Emerald Nightmare, Duque could fill this divine weapon to the brim and reach its maximum power in one go. Ha 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 ha. Duque was in a good mood. He had not felt this way in a long time. Speaking of character, many African players in the game had not gotten what they wanted, even after countless versions. For example, those unlucky people who could not get the undead horse no matter what. Another example was an African warrior called Recruit, who had half of the skull of imprisonment of the Windchaser, and could not get it even after many years. Killing a random Nessandra and getting a divine weapon to pick up was really awesome. Beside himself, Duque subconsciously hugged the slender waist of the woman beside him and kissed her on the face. Oh wait. Something was wrong. Looking at the pair of huge dragon horns and green hair, as well as the cute face that tilted her head, Duque realized that he had kissed the wrong person. Sorry Isra. I was so happy that I got carried away. Duke stammered, which was rare for him. It's okay. This is human etiquette to show friendliness. I saw Kalia and Elugia kissing each other's cheeks when they met, Isra said seriously. Duque was really shocked. Good. I managed to hide it. I just kissed her like I was in the harem. I swear to God, I don't have any special feelings for Miss Isra. Yeah. Next, let's continue to look for the source of the corrosion. Yeah. I'll listen to you. Amazing. Isra did not know if it was because Duque had killed a corrosive dragon's shadow with a slap that gave Isra a lot of confidence. Although her subordinate had died, she was still a little unhappy, but at least she had adjusted herself. The duty that was rooted in the heart of the dragon aspects was an iron law that could not be broken. Perhaps Isra would be sad, but in her heart, protecting the Emerald Dream was still her top priority. Duque waved his hand, and the surrounding scenery melted again. The scarlet scenery melted under a pair of huge flaming palms that appeared out of thin air. If it was a normal person who entered the Emerald Dream, they would have long been dizzy from the thick smell of corrosion. If they were not careful, even their minds would be easily corrupted, and then they would type GG amidst the laughter. Duque was different. The system had given him unparalleled analytical abilities. As long as he simply looked for the most turbid and dense area of dark energy, and then found the difference between the levels of corrosion in the turbulence, it would be easy to go against the flow and find the source of the corrosion. He gently pushed to the left and swung to the right. As if a new world had been opened, the next boss appeared in front of Duque and Isra. This is... Isra frowned. Ignis, the heart of corrosion. Chapter 2016. The heart of corrosion. Ignos was a huge eyeball. His huge body could fit a frigate inside, and his ominous scarlet eyes would make an ordinary hero tremble in fear when they looked at him. As for Duque, I've even destroyed Seathun. Who do you think you are? Just as Duque was about to make his move, the nightmare barrier on the left was suddenly pierced through. A huge spider-like monster charged into the battlefield. It looked very similar to the Mother Ashen spider that Duque had killed in the Land of Fire. It also had 6 legs and 2 huge front pincers. Its entire body was dark black, but the rest of its body glowed with a fiery red light. Duque knew that it was the other boss, Alarise, that could switch between spider and rock forms. Even Isra became alert after encountering 2 bosses at once, much less Duque. Duque, something's not right. No. It's just a normal reaction. The enemy isn't stupid. They won't line up and wait for me to kill them. Since they can't hide, they'll definitely choose to group up and see if they can kill me. This was like a minor character shouting, "He's only one person." And trying to win with numbers was a sign of cowardice. Duque pursed his lips, but his expression was still calm, as if he was brushing off a speck of dust from his sleeves. There's no difference. I'll kill one, and I'll kill two. Just as Duque was showing off, the space fluctuated violently again. Space fluctuated violently again. This time, cracks appeared on the right side of the airdrop barrier. Crack. Crack. It was a continuous explosion that sounded like glass shattering. Izra's green eyes suddenly narrowed, and a deep sadness appeared on his face. It was another familiar presence, Isendra, Amelise, Laythorn, and Taylor. Isendra, who had once been Izra's most loyal guardian, had changed beyond recognition. She had been corrupted by darkness and nightmares. If she was allowed to leave the Emerald Nightmare, it would only spread panic and chaos on the Azeroth continent. Her previous healing abilities were replaced by dark magic. She could release smoke like lightning waves and summon demon druids. Isolde and her companions had the ability to hypnotize their enemies into their worst nightmares. Duque sighed. As a transmigrator, he had done his best. Many Fallen or Fallen Alliance experts in history had their fates unknowingly changed by him, obtaining salvation and a new life. There would always be some unlucky fellows who could avoid it once, but they couldn't avoid it forever. That was what happened to Isendra and the other three. As the 4 emerald dragons that were supposed to have fallen during the Molten Core era, because of Duque's reminder, Izra discovered their tendency to fall in advance and forcefully straighten them out. It was a pity that the Green Dragon Army's power bonus in the Emerald Dream had become a poison that accelerated their corruption. They were used to absorbing energy from the Emerald Dream, and when the Emerald Dream was contaminated, they were also corrupted into nightmare dragons. If Duque hadn't interfered, Izra would probably be the same. Seeing her subordinates and companions that had accompanied her for more than 25,000 years degenerate into hideous forms, Izra was heartbroken. She didn't want Duque to see her sad look, so she lowered her head, her chin almost touching her chest. Duque. Yes. Give them relief. Okay. Just like when a paladin fell into a death knight, his power was definitely stronger than that of an ordinary expert. Once an ancient dragon that guarded the Emerald Dream was corrupted, the danger it posed would increase exponentially. Duque scanned his surroundings. When he combined his spiritual sense with the system's scanning, he was a little surprised to find that the fallen bear god Ushuk, who was supposed to be a member of the Emerald Nightmare Dungeon, was not here. After thinking about it for a while, he felt relieved. The original Bear Monster brothers had their souls freed by mortal heroes under the decaying world tree. But that relief was only temporary. The place where their souls returned to was the Emerald Dream, where demigod souls could be stored. Thus in history, when the Emerald Dream became a nightmare, the poor bear demon demigod also fell. In this life, Ushuk and Ushuk were working under Duque. Even their soul source had been transferred into the weave, allowing the two brothers to escape a calamity. In addition, the King of Nightmares, Savis, was already done for. If there were no accidents, the Emerald Nightmare should be the only boss left. Is everyone here? If so, then let's end this. Duque snapped his fingers. For some reason, he just wanted to snap his fingers. Perhaps this represented acting cool. In reality, there was a deeper reason here. This was the Emerald Dream, a place where one could visualize things when one's spiritual force was used to the extreme. From the start, using some element to forcefully break into this space to destroy the enemy was not wrong, but it was definitely a thankless effort. Izra was indescribably shocked. She never thought that an outsider like Duque, after asking her how to use the Emerald Dream for a while, would actually master the trick of this special space in such a short time. Zzz, a strange sound. A thick beam of golden light burst out from the ground, piercing through the heavens and penetrating the earth. As a witness at the center of the beam of light, Izra had no words to describe the terror of this attack. That control was too precise. She had never seen a light cannon that could be hollow. When the light cannon shot out, It created a small hollow area, which was like the eye of a tornado. No matter how strong the winds howled outside and engulfed the world, the interior was peaceful and quiet. It was precisely because Duke, the controller, was completely unscathed. The light cannon hit where the 6 huge bosses were. Originally, there were 6 gigantic monsters, but now from 6 different directions, they formed a circle and firmly surrounded the 2 of them. Who knew that this thick ring of light cannon would directly cover the area where each boss was? The golden ring of light cannons broke through the ground, hit the relatively soft lower abdomen of each boss. The beam of light pierced through the sky, and the bodies of the 6 bosses began to dissipate within the ring of light. All of this took only a breath's time. It couldn't be said to be as fast as lightning, but it was still frighteningly fast. Izura estimated that even with her full reflexes, she would not be able to react in time. The most she could do was create an instant defensive barrier, and the rest could only rely on her powerful dragon body to resist. But the more she witnessed it as a bystander, the more shocked Izura felt. She subconsciously squinted against the strong light, and involuntarily held onto Duke's arm tighter. Bang! There was a sound that was completely different from the explosion in the real world. The attack that Duke summoned was like a new Ungoro crater in the Emerald Nightmare. Chapter 2017. This. Izura seemed to have lost the ability to express herself. This scene was too shocking, so shocking that it couldn't be any more shocking. She had been in charge of the Emerald Dream for 25,000 years. She never knew that such a terrifying move could be used in a spiritual world like the Emerald Dream. It's like, Izura mumbled, the main cannon of the fortress of the universe, isn't it? Duke gave Izura a confident smile. Yes. Izura couldn't help but nod. Looking at the scene of the ashes, Duke felt like he was dragging a literary girl to an art gallery to admire some rare masterpiece. If this was considered art, it should be a kind of performance art, or the art of battle. Duke chuckled. It doesn't matter if it's the Emerald Dream or the Nightmare. At the end of the day, it's a world of spiritual materialization. Imagination is the most powerful weapon. As long as the spiritual power in your body can keep up with the power of the weapon you imagine, then your dream will come true. That's right. Here, as long as a mortal believes that he is dead, then he will definitely die in reality. This law applies to all existences in this spiritual world. Even the leader-tier monsters in the Emerald Nightmare, if their minds believe that they will perish, then they will naturally perish. Duke gently led Izura forward, taking a leisurely stroll. As he walked, he admired the 6 giant leader monsters of the nightmare. In the seemingly dazzling but actually extremely gentle golden light, they were reduced to ashes. The shock on Izura's face had yet to fade. Every existence with demigod-level spiritual power had the possibility to fire a similar light cannon here. But Izura knew that there was not a single one who could do what Duke did. Just like the god of the wilderness, they had this kind of potential. But their extremely primitive life experience meant that they would not be able to imagine themselves using such a killer move. Without imagination, there was no higher possibility. If it were the raven goddess Iwina or the turtle god Tatora, they would probably be tortured to death by these 6 leader monsters in a few moves. In terms of imagination, Duke was absolutely different from them. His experience determined that he had more room to display his abilities in a space where his mind could be materialized. Izura let out a long sigh. I was right about you. Duke naturally put a hand on the back of Izura's hand. Yes, so you can trust me more. This time it was Izura who laughed. Do I not trust you enough? When I was about to die, the first person I thought of was you. Duke was about to say something when he suddenly fell silent. As a transmigrator, he originally had no feelings for the remaining 1 or 2. They felt that he was no different from the other bosses. However, when the emotions of the people around him were mixed in, everything became different. Duke. Please save Malfurion. Tyrant's words echoed in Duke's ears. As the leader of the Night Elves, Tyrant had to control the situation. The Night Elves had a vast territory. Although they did not fight for every inch of it, They could not allow the Burning Legion to open teleportation gates in their territory. Tyron could not leave, so she could only entrust the task of saving her childhood friend to Duque. To be honest, Duque did not feel uncomfortable about saving Malfurion. After all, this great druid with antlers on his head and his signature green grassland hat was definitely a good person. In this life, after knowing that Tyron's heart belonged to someone else, Malfurion withdrew and continued to support Tyron's work silently. Duque felt that Cenarius was the one who was troubled. In the past, when Cenarius was hacked to death by Grandpa Roar's axe, Duque would only laugh. But now, not only had Cenarius been corrupted by the Jade Nightmare, his foster mother was holding Duque's hand. This kind of bastard was simply speechless. Isra, let me tell you. Just as Duque was about to tell her the results of the system's scan, the entire world suddenly shook. A red dot appeared in the air. In the blink of an eye, an ominous crimson color once again filled the vision of the man and dragon. Evil was spreading, and the rot was expanding endlessly. In the center of all the crazy nightmare aura, a four-legged centaur with the lower body of a horse appeared. His body was tall and wild. On his lower body, on the horse's back, on his shoulders, and on his enormous antlers, there were many fiery red things that looked like crystal wristlets. As he walked, these fiery red crystals were like burning flames, trembling nonstop. Even his hair had turned from green to a muddy red. Isra covered her mouth. She couldn't believe her eyes. No, she had already expected this. Before seeing it with her own eyes, she had always held on to a tiny, tiny hope. At this moment, all hope was gone. Sina. Julius. Isra's voice sounded like she was in a dream. The corrosion of the emerald dream was too much for her. She felt like she had fallen into an eternal nightmare, unable to wake up no matter what. Isra, actually I can. Duque, who had forgotten about this, did not know how to comfort Isra. No, Duque, you have already helped me too much. Isra raised her beautiful face, 2 drops of tears already falling from the corners of her eyes. Some things can only be done by oneself. No other existence can help. Oh. Duque could only respond in silence. 25,000 years. That's a really long time. As his adoptive mother, I watched him grow up. I watched him develop his own beliefs and become the spiritual leader of the Cenarian Circle. Maybe this is war. Isra's face was full of sadness. Then, she gave Duque a smile that looked like she was laughing but was actually crying. Under Duque's gaze, she began to activate the ultimate transformation spell. In just 2 seconds, she changed back to her original form, that beautiful green dragon. Oh wait, the description of a dragon did not seem to match the current Isra's name. The size was obviously wrong. At this moment, the dragon Isra was only less than 20 meters with her wings spread out. Her body was only about 15 meters long. To humans, she was still a giant. To Cenarius, who had expanded like an inflatable balloon under the power of the shapeshifters, Isra's body was not enough, and even a little weak. It had been proven countless times that dragons did not have an advantage in close combat among creatures of the same body size. Normally, Isra could of course use all kinds of magic or special spiritual attacks to torture her opponent to the point where they could not live and could not die. The problem was that Isra's soul had just been heavily injured. Chapter 2018. Are you alright? Duque asked hesitantly. Regardless of whether I'm alright or not, this is my duty. Duque, you deal with the last enemy. Duque turned his head and instantly saw the void on his right explode. In that void, space shattered like broken glass, revealing a giant monster with an inverted triangular upper body. This head was more devilish, with the common curved goat horns that demons had. That burly body made it look a little like a barbarian soldier from the Burning Legion. It was a big monster like this. No matter how one looked at it, it didn't match the elegant and violent profession of Pharaoh. Others didn't know, but Duque obviously knew who it was. The system had marked everything. Savi's afterimage. Duque suddenly felt bored. Savi's, it's Savi's again. Ever since the ancient war, he had toyed with this guy and ordered him around like a little brother. Later on, He had tried to cause trouble many times, but he had failed and ended up being destroyed. In the previous timeline, this guy had been tricked to death, and even a large part of his soul had been destroyed. At that time, the treacherous, cowardly Enzos hadn't run out to pick up his remaining bones. To be honest, Duque had been worried about this and that in the past. But after becoming stronger, Duque looked down on Enzos. Other than scheming and causing trouble, this guy had never dared to jump out and fight head-on. When Enzo's flawless schemes in history were repeated again and again in front of Duque, this transmigrator, Duque just wanted to yawn and say, "Are you done yet?" Others might fear Savi's title of King of Nightmares. Unfortunately, in this life, Savi's power had been greatly reduced. His scheme had failed once, and this title of king was really lacking. Without the support of a powerful soul, Enzos could only create this toy-like giant and stuff Savi's remnant soul into it to make up the numbers. Under the system scan, Savi's remnant soul wasn't even 5% of its peak. The seemingly huge soul was filled with a large amount of soul residue from other unknown creatures. Duque. Marcus, I'm back. Sticking out his long tongue, he obviously looked like a demon, but Duque felt that he looked like a hanged ghost from the Celestial Empire, whose tongue was being strangled by an invisible rope. "Sai, I kill you every time. I'm embarrassed. I'll give you some special benefits this time." Duque snapped his fingers. Sarvis was instantly dumbfounded, because a female titan appeared. No matter how large a giant's body was, if it didn't have a corresponding physique or special ability, it would only be a live target on the battlefield. Even if all the giant-sized guardians of Azeroth were to appear in front of Savis, who had an incomplete soul, he would not be afraid, let alone a female giantess. They would most likely howl and charge forward to chop him down. She was definitely an exception, because she was impressively Queen Azhara. That pair of long legs that took up at least 60% of her total height, that slender waist, that chest that was at least a ton. Cough cough. Although it was a female titan with a height of 30 stories, the proportions of her body and appearance were 100% the original. Savis was dumbfounded. "Savis, my loyal servant Neil." The exact same voice, the exact same eyes, the exact same aura. If it wasn't for the fact that this Queen Azhara's size was really wrong, Savis would definitely have thought that this was the Empress herself. Savi's thick neck seemed to be rusted to death. He turned his head with difficulty and looked at Duque. His expression was unknown, whether it was anger, pain, or sorrow. "Duke Marcus, you're messing with me?" "That's right. I'm messing with you." Duque was very happy to be mischievous. At this moment, the giant version of Queen Azhara spoke again. "Savis, if you yield, I can consider letting you be my guest in the bedroom." Savis's originally small soul suddenly became incomparably messed up. Before the War of the Ancients, Savis had already served the queen for close to 10,000 years. Even though Queen Azhara was arrogant and silly, she was publicly recognized as the #1 beauty among the night elves back then. Of course, that completely blue skin was something Dumuk couldn't accept in the past. Ever since he accidentally slapped her hooves, it didn't seem so unsightly anymore. However, even an outsider like Duque could clearly feel Savis's crazy love for the queen. Speaking of which, there weren't many males among the night elves who didn't like Queen Azhara. Perhaps the Stormrage brothers were an exception. It wasn't that Queen Azhara didn't know, but she was used to using her beauty to manipulate her admirers, making them risk their lives for her, and toying with all the big bosses in the palm of her hand. It was precisely this habit that gave her the confidence to think that she could capture the heart of the fallen titan Sargeras. Sai, who knew that Sargeras would have such a heavy taste. He liked female orcs like Garona who could smash watermelons with their pectoral muscles. Other than his master Enzos, Savis wasn't afraid of anyone. Now it seemed that he had to add Queen Azhara to the mix. The real Queen Azhara was still alive and kicking in the Broken Islands, so she naturally wouldn't come here to spoil things. This was what Duque was doing with the Emerald Nightmare's characteristics. "Don't you like your queen very much? Come on. Pretentious. Create trouble. I announce in the name of the queen that you are going to become a masochist." Savis was about 8 stories tall at the moment. To a human he was definitely a giant. But in front of Queen Azhara, who was controlled by Duque and was purely spiritual materialization. He was like a ball. A pair of long, blue legs stomped down on him. Savi's collapsed on the spot. "Ah, Your Majesty, no. That. Ah." Duque used the system to project the Azhara in his memory, and then he controlled the female giant Azhara to abuse Savi's. After a few rounds, Duque was absolutely sure that this guy was an incurable foot fetish, queen fetish, masochist. Perhaps he had really played a similar unspeakable game with Azhara in the past. Anyway, after a series of Queen's Trample and Queen's Whip, Savi's typed Gigi amidst the laughter. Right. This guy actually had a satisfied smile on his face before he died. Duque held his forehead. Did I do something wrong? Savi's remnant soul, which had been infused with Enzo's evil divine power, was definitely not weak, but Duque had grasped his greatest weakness. Every piece of Savi's soul was branded with a twisted love for Azhara, which caused his already incomplete soul to become even more unstable. After a few rounds, like a sand sculpture on the beach being washed away by the waves, Savi's remnant shadow collapsed. Yes, it was indeed a sand sculpture. Everyone repeat after me, sand sculpture. Chapter 2019. Duque felt that Enzos was extremely annoying. Disgusting, sinister, despicable, stabbing me in the back. What does it have to do with Enzos that the Burning Legion wants to destroy the world? Wake up, the Qing dynasty has already perished. Oh no, your darkness empire has already perished for 25,000 years. What old and young? They just couldn't see reality clearly. Back then, Sargeras was able to destroy you ancient gods once. Even if he's not representing the pantheon now, do you think he'll share this planet with you, Enzos? He had no idea what Enzos was doing here. However, it was clear that the corrosive jadeite dream was an important part of Enzos' grand scheme. If it wasn't for the system scan, Duque would never have known that Savi's afterimage actually contained a massive amount of decaying energy. This amount was probably enough to pollute the Emerald Dream 10 times over. If by any chance Duque was really foolish enough to go up and fight Savi's, then after beating Savi's up in minutes, what awaited him was self-destruction. After Savi's enlarged, his big belly was filled with highly concentrated pus. They were all contaminants on the mental plane. Once he encountered it, it would be 10,000 times worse than indoctrinating a little girl who believes in Santa Claus into Japanese action movies. If Duque really touched it himself, he would be brainwashed like his good comrade, Earth Guardian Nesario, in minutes. If Duque didn't take the bait, Enzo's fishing tactic naturally wouldn't work. When a certain someone used the smallest price to defeat the final boss of Savi's afterimage, he then broke through another situation. On the other side, Izura was almost kneeling. Izura tried his best to swing his claws, but he could not stop Cenarius' attack. No. Damn it, you. Tentacle play was really exciting. If not for the fact that Izura was still in his dragon form, even the most perverted bards wouldn't dare to describe this scene. It was just as Duque had predicted. Izura was at an absolute disadvantage. Due to the damage to his soul, he was unable to use dream magic, so Izura could only fight like the progenitor dragon. Unfortunately, after shrinking in size, all of her claws, tail strikes, wing strikes, and even dragon bites became much less powerful. The only bright spot was that Izura's dragon breath of nature had actually purified many of Cenarius' summoned creatures. There were a few dryads who had been purified, the forest sisters who were deer and knew some nature magic, and Malfurion. Duque didn't expect that Malfurion would come here. He had no time to ask why Malfurion was here. After all, according to the system, Malfurion was only at half health, and he still had a lot of magic power. As long as a great druid with a huge amount of mana still had a breath left in him, he would be able to replenish his HP and recover in no time. Duque raised his hand and a huge ice shield blocked the thorns that Cenarius threw at Malfurion. Malfurion was stunned. He then saw Duque and nodded at Duque. Duke no longer cared about the great druid with the oily green head, and turned to attack Cenarius. Roar. Corrosion. Madness. Only nightmares are eternal. Cenarius raised his hands and shouted a bunch of nonsense unique to psychopaths. Duque didn't feel anything. As a modern industrialist, he was destined to never be in the same boat as a naturalist. With a thought, dozens of flame blades appeared out of thin air and slashed at the tentacles and thorns that the fallen Cenarius had created. The next second, Duque was shocked. The flames were very effective against the rotten tentacles and vines. They burned off the tentacles that wrapped around Isra in the blink of an eye. But in less than 1/100th of a second, more rotten vines grew out of thin air and continued to wrap around Isra's body, getting tighter and tighter. Isra's neck was suffocating. Transform, Duque shouted. No, Isra refused. Turning into a human meant that she had given up this battle forever. Cenarius had a special meaning to her. He's not Cenarius, Duque suddenly added. He's... Isra was so shocked that she even forgot to struggle. Yo, Enzos, you're finally willing to show up? Even if it's just a small part? Duque sneered at the seemingly violent Cenarius who kept using dark plant magic. Time seemed to freeze. Isra was the former master of this world after all. She began to use her strongest senses to examine this fallen adopted son in front of her. The next moment, without even greeting Duque, her still huge body suddenly shrunk. Duke didn't let Isra's decision go to waste. With a stretch of his hand, a mage's hand larger than a human appeared out of thin air and pulled Isra back into his night elf form. Almost as soon as she was pulled into Duque's arms, Isra collapsed again. As expected, fighting with a damaged soul was too much of a burden for her. On the other side, Cenarius had a stunned expression on his face, and then he laughed sinisterly. How interesting. Duke Marcus, I'm really getting more and more interested in you. His voice became extremely deep and thick, like thunder, like a drum, and even more so had a coldness that transcended the mortal world. It was a lofty arrogance that looked down on all life in the world. Hey, Enzos, this is our first greeting. I thought you would hide in a dark corner forever and not come out. Duque held Isra, who was panting heavily from exhaustion, and stared at Cenarius, who had Enzos will attached to him. Cenarius shook the huge index finger of his right hand. No. According to you humans, I'm a chess player. For a chess player to be reduced to being a chess piece, isn't that a bit too degrading? Wow. What you said makes a lot of sense. Do I need your autograph? Hehe. Duque turned on his mocking mode. Do you think Sargeras will treat you as a chess player? Enzos was speechless. As an ancient god, he thought highly of himself and looked down on everyone. Apart from occasionally colluding with his old companions who were also ancient gods, Enzos really hadn't been happy with anyone. In the era of the Dark Empire, the various ancient gods didn't give in to each other and fought each other. As for Sargeras, it would be a lie to say that he didn't hate him. The descent of the Pantheon had destroyed the dreams of the ancient gods. Even if Sargeras had fallen, would Sargeras look up to Enzos, who had lost to him in the past? The one who understood someone the most was definitely their enemy. Chapter 2020. According to Sargeras's personality, even if he cleared out all the righteous forces on Azeroth, he would still pull N'Zoth out of the planet's core and beat him up. N'Zoth's turtle-like fighting style was meaningless against Sargeras. Duque and the rest couldn't possibly tear down Azeroth and turn it upside down to drag him out. Sargeras was different. At most, he would blow up the entire planet after he got his hands on the good stuff on Azeroth. N'Zoth was rendered speechless by Duque. In any case, he already knew that he couldn't do anything to Duque this time. Therefore, he didn't even reply and retreated cleanly. He didn't even say anything harsh. Without a sound, he let his remaining consciousness withdraw from Cenarius's body. My brother Enzo, a ruthless god, doesn't talk much. Almost as soon as N'Zoth's consciousness left, the fallen Cenarius charged over like a wild horse with an anus prolapse. Duque really wanted to describe this fallen demigod in the form of a centaur or something. Unfortunately, Cenarius was howling as if he was on steroids. As he ran, he left behind large clumps of corrosive substances. These were all the rotten substances that were originally sealed in his body to increase his power of corruption. But once Enzoth left, in order to discuss Duque, he pulled out a plug. Cenarius charged forward while leaving behind a pile of things. Not only were there green and yellow smelly pollutants, but there were also things that looked like internal organs. This was clearly an anus prolapse. Sigh, what rotten land, rotten world. I hate coming to places like this the most. Duque's left hand carried the half-collapsed Isra. He raised his right hand's middle finger and index finger. A spark appeared. In half a second. In this world where one could do whatever they wanted as long as they had enough mental strength and imagination, a monstrous fire was ignited. From the edge of his field of vision to the front of Duque's feet, as long as he looked in the direction of Cenarius, all he could see were blazing flames. Endless flames that connected the sky and the sun. Burn your demigod, Motherf ****. The fallen Cenarius continued to shout, shouting words that even he himself did not know what they were. However, the sea of fire quickly caught up to him, burning his forelegs that were oozing pus and igniting his shoulders and antlers that were covered in fiery red crystal clusters. Wow. Pairs of flaming hands appeared one after another, clawing at Cenarius' body. Almost every claw tore off large chunks of rotten flesh from his body, rapidly charring the wounds. However, new flaming hands grabbed at the huge Cenarius, rapidly roasting him. It was a charge of death. After a few steps, Cenarius lost his balance and fell to the ground. That was the bad thing about four-legged guys who were too big. Once their legs were broken, they would be dead on the spot. He randomly summoned rotten thorns and other messy things in an attempt to attack Duque. Unfortunately, he couldn't, and neither could his summons. As a demigod with a strong inclination toward support, his greatest characteristic was his ability to reduce energy consumption. When the enemy's attack exceeded his recovery ability, his defense could ignore his attack methods. In that case, the title of Tire Killer would lose its meaning. Cenarius was still struggling in vain, but his cries made Isra tremble. Malfurion, who was watching this scene from afar, felt sad. The great druid knelt on the ground. He looked blankly at Cenarius, who was struggling in the sea of flames and walking towards death. The fall and death of Cenarius was definitely a huge blow to the druid sect. The first time he was killed by Grom's axe, it could still be said that Cenarius wasn't a battle-type demigod. But this fall would directly affect all the druids in the Cenarian circle. Malfurion suddenly felt lost and emotional about the unknown road ahead. He looked at Isra, who was crying softly on Duque's shoulder, and thought to himself, I'm afraid the future of the druids will fall on the Green Dragon Queen's shoulders. The death of the fallen Cenarius symbolized the collapse of the last point of corrosion in the Emerald Nightmare. In the entire dream world, whirlpools of various sizes suddenly appeared in countless places. These whirlpools sucked in all the corrosive things. At a speed visible to the naked eye, the Emerald Dream was recovering. Duque sighed. This was the Emerald Dream, the magical spiritual world left behind by the Titans, the natural blueprint of Azeroth. Without the source of corrosion interfering, the Emerald Dream's own recovery ability was enough. There was no need for external forces to restore it. Historically, after defeating Savis, when Alun took away Isra's purified soul, the Emerald Dream recovered its beauty. Although this battle had started anticlimactic, the key was that Duque had cut off the possibility of the corrosion spreading further at the first opportunity. When Duque saved Isra, it meant that Enzoth could not destroy the entire Emerald Dream at the fastest speed possible. This was the key of all. Duque suddenly noticed that there was a brilliant orange glow on Cenarius's charred remains that dissipated with the wind. He was no stranger to this glow, but he did not expect that he would be so lucky as to obtain another divine artifact. With a wave of his hand, the magician's hand naturally helped him pick up the item. Norganon's foresight, a pair of divine-made shoes. Magic should be regulated, managed and controlled. At the same time, it should be understood and cherished, not left on the shelf. You must thoroughly understand this contradiction. This inscription carved in the Titan language on the heel of the shoe sounded quite sophisticated. Duque did not care. At his level, he already had his own unique understanding of magic. What Duque really valued was the speed of elemental condensation provided by this pair of divine artifact shoes. The Titan rune magic circle attached to it had a tactic that could gather arcane and other elements at a higher speed. This tactic was like the Alliance's army, which was still using diesel as fuel, suddenly being upgraded to the level of small-scale nuclear power. The magnitude of the improvement was obvious. As expected, a divine artifact related to the Pantheon Titan was awesome. Almost as soon as the divine artifact shoes were in his hands, Duque subconsciously wanted to kiss the beauty in his arms. This time, Duque braked. There was no way. Malfurion, that third wheel, was still watching. "Go back," Duque said. Although weak, Isra said resolutely, "Go back? Go back where? This is my duty, the emerald dream that I swore to protect with my soul and life. You have to at least recover." Duque interrupted her. "You've already cut off your connection with the emerald dream. And do you think that Enzoth really left without leaving any spies in the emerald dream? Don't be naive. He can still invade this place when you're at your peak. You're so weak now. As soon as I leave, you'll fall. This time the emerald dream is really finished." Chapter 2021. In theory, Isra would recover the fastest if she stayed in the Emerald Dream. However, the defense of the Emerald Dream was weak and useless. Enzos was a troublemaker. As long as Duque dared to leave, Isra would be left alone. Next time, Isra and the Emerald Dream would be destroyed together. Isra was completely stunned. She never thought that one day it would be her, the King of Dreams. Leaving the Emerald Dream would be the best way to deal with this place. The guilt of wanting to fulfill her duty, but having to abandon it, almost made her break down. "All right, maybe you're right. I'll go discuss it with my sister." Isra lowered her head. "Then, do you have any suggestions on how to quickly recover from soul damage?" Duque was stuck. His own physique was definitely a wonder. He could absorb other soul elements and turn them into his own soul without destroying the essence of his own soul. He seemed to be the only one in the world. Isra, you should go talk to Alun." "All right." Duque first opened a portal and sent Isra back to the Sleeping Dragon Temple. Then he brought Malfurion back to Darnassus and handed him over to Tyrande at the Moon Goddess Temple. Seeing her childhood friend return safely, Tyrande was very happy. "Oh Duque, thank you so much." Ever since Tyrande stepped down as High Priestess and gave the position to Chandris, she continued to rule the Night Elves as Alun's representative. Tyrande had been freed from many restraints. As long as it was not a public occasion, she did not mind showing off her close relationship with Duque. Right in front of Malfurion, Tyrande generously kissed him. Malfurion was already used to it. There was no loneliness, only calmness. "Lord Marcus, thank you again for your help. The Cenarian Circle still needs me, so I'll take my leave first. You guys continue." Malfurion bowed and left. Tyrande, who had gotten carried away, felt a little embarrassed. Only the two of them were left. Duque briefly explained the situation in the Emerald Dream. "Has Cenarius finally fallen?" "Yes." Tyrande let out a long sigh. "Fortunately, we managed to avoid the worst. However, the Green Dragon army was also half destroyed. To maintain the anti-Titan circle, Isra's dragon aspects were indispensable. I hope she can recover soon." Faced with this result, Duque also had a headache. Enzos had definitely gone overboard this time. What good would destroying the anti-Titan array formation do him? This was practically lighting up the latrine, looking for shit. Now that Bossa was here, he wouldn't have it easy either. Did he really think that the Justice faction was stronger than the Burning Legion? He really didn't know how the brains of these ancient gods worked. "Are there any other opportunities? I feel like we're being too passive." Tyrande's words made sense. Duque was also having a headache. The war on the Broken Islands had been progressing steadily. The Alliance began to build frontline bases in all directions of the islands. However, the battle situation had always been at a stalemate. For every meter that the front line was pushed forward, they had to pay the price of dozens or even hundreds of soldiers' lives. Outside the Broken Islands, the entire world was mobilized. Almost 24 hours a day, the various B squadrons were in a state of exhaustion, busy intercepting the burning Legion's assault battleships and planet destroyers. The opportunity is coming. I believe the Pantheon won't miss this. There were as many things to do as a mountain. Duque returned to Karazhan first. Even though he was able to destroy everything in the Emerald Nightmare, those ultimate moves were quite taxing on him. This wasn't like in the game. After using up all his mental power, it would not affect him at all. He could slowly replenish it himself. This was just like when he was immortal, he could pull 2 all-nighters in a row. Phew. Vanessa, I just finished dealing with the Jade Nightmare and had a confrontation with Enzos. I'm exhausted. Rest for a while. Don't call me if there's nothing major about the front line collapsing. Yes, I understand, Master. Ever since entering this time, Vanessa had become much more obedient. She was no longer the little girl who often threw tantrums. Demigods were not invincible. Even with a demigod's body, they would still die. Cenarius's death shook the entire Alliance camp. A few years ago, when Vanessa realized that the fate of the entire Alliance, and even the entire Azeroth, rested on Duque's seemingly delicate shoulders, her attitude towards Duque had become much better. Duque fell asleep. It was rare for him to sleep not out of habit, but out of an instinctive need as a living creature. Just like the gods of the wilderness who recovered themselves after their life destruction in the Emerald Dream. As he fell asleep, Duque vaguely felt a woman who was not unfamiliar come over to him. What a nice smell. Duque didn't care and hugged her like a human pillow. When Duque woke up after sleeping for a day and a night, he was covered in cold sweat. 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 A waterfall of sweat. Oh my, why is it Isra? He had to say that the ultimate transformation spell was amazing. Although Isra was still in the human form that Duque was familiar with, without the iconic dragon horns and the facial lines that Duque didn't like, other than the long ears and eyebrows, Isra was no different from a human. Much more pleasing to the eye. But why did you come to my place? You're awake? Good morning. Oh, good evening. Isra's voice was still as pleasant as ever. By the way, this is my bedroom, my bed, right? Just in case, Duque confirmed the surroundings. That's right. Then why did you come here? Duque was too embarrassed. Because it was too convenient, he had his arm around her shoulder, and his claws were on her waist. No, I had something to talk to you about. But after I relaxed, I suddenly felt very lonely, so I learned from you humans and snuggled together. Actually, I realized that it felt pretty good. Her face clearly said, I don't really understand you humans, but Isra's lonely eyes suddenly stabbed into a soft spot in Duque's heart. Involuntarily, Duque hugged Isra tightly. Are you better now? I still feel a bit better. Duque couldn't help but use more strength. How about now? Phew. Isra's breath blew on Duque's neck. It was a bit ticklish. Unknowingly, smelling the faint fragrance in the magical green hair, Duque felt a bit restless. Suddenly, Isra raised her head. Can you kiss me? I want to see what it feels like to kiss you. She used the most sincere emotions to say these slightly lost words, but the tears in the corners of her eyes were crystal clear. The kind of aura that made people unconsciously want to love her easily broke down Duque's defenses. Chapter 2022. What did a dragon's tongue feel like? Duque was one of the few people in the world with experience. He just wanted to say that a dragon's tongue that could lengthen when needed and was extremely flexible was definitely a bug. Normally, no ordinary person would put their limbs into a dragon's mouth. What was the difference between that and sending food? But thinking about it, this was very similar to circus performers putting their heads and hands into the mouths of lions and crocodiles. The rapid secretion of adrenaline. The kind of anxiety where your heart instantly accelerated to 200 beats per minute, and your life was hanging by a thread. It was so exciting. Even though he knew that Isra wouldn't harm him, Duque couldn't help but get excited first. And this dragon's tongue wasn't the usual dragon's tongue. Unlike Onyxia, who had been tamed countless times, Isra came on her own. That soft touch, mixed with the feeling of a soft girl like Kalia and the forbidden pleasure of conquering a dragon, made Duque a little unable to take it anymore. Yeah. Chirp chirp. Isra responded to Duque immaturely. After a long time, Duque finally escaped from the dragon's mouth. Isra, this seems. Actually, Duque was using what little rationality and integrity he had left to support himself. He felt that it wasn't good. Although it seemed very fair for a hero to save a damsel in distress. She was Isra, the Green Dragon King. It just felt a little weird. Isra tilted her head and revealed a sweet yet adorable expression. No wonder Oni said that you're a swordsman. Swordsman? Damn. Wait, did that guy really say that? You actually asked her about me? God, what are you guys thinking? Isra didn't answer Duque. She directly used her ultimate move, teasing the sword. This was no longer teasing. She started with a dragon tongue. Damn. So exciting. With his life hanging by a thread, Duque struggled with all his might, pressing the dragon's head and pushing it out. But Duque's godly sword stabbed toward the dragon's throat back and forth. After countless rounds, Duque finally used his ultimate move. Great Summoning. Deoxyribose Knights. Without giving Isra any time to react, Duque pulled on the dragon's leg and flipped the humanoid dragon over. The still incomparably sharp Duque godly sword turned into a dragon-taming whip and attacked the dragon's lair continuously. Dragon Slayer Sword. Tap and stab. With a moment of carelessness, Duque shook out a 999 combo. The dragon's roar almost pierced through the roof. Seeing that he couldn't win, Isra, who had started the war, chose to retreat strategically. Who would have thought that Duque, who had the upper hand, would not let go? He grabbed the dragon's waist and bit the dragon's nape, activating backstab. The giant dragon completely collapsed, crying and begging for mercy. Unfortunately, Duque was relentless. After a total of 2,333 consecutive stabs, he finally let go of the dying giant dragon. Grabbing Dragon's peak with his hands, he bit the back of Isra's neck as if he was grinding his teeth. Duque could feel Isra changing with every bite from Duque. From the initial discomfort, to letting him do whatever he wanted. This feeling was awesome. Biting the back of his neck, Duque ordered, "From today onwards you're my dragon." Yes. You can't let other dragons touch you anymore. Yes. After a long while, Duque hugged Isra and asked, "Why did you do this?" "Nothing. I felt that you would like it this way, so I wanted to try it. I wanted to do it, so I did it. Anyway, it felt good." Duque was a little stunned. Sure enough, each dragon was different. Onyxia was a classic case of having too many ideas. Isra was completely emotional. As for how his relationship with Isra came about, Duque was also very confused. Just as Isra said, it felt good. Inexplicably, a giant dragon had joined the harem. Duke did not know what to tell his wives about such a muddled matter. But obviously, Onyxia had raised all four claws in agreement, and Tyrande would probably agree. As for the rest, he did not want to think about it. Where are you going next? Isra had become his dragon, and Duque was naturally even more anxious. I still have a little bit of dragon aspect power left, and can barely maintain the anti-Titan formation on the planet. But I want to rest here for a while. I've asked Delun and Sister Alexstrasza. They said that if there is a way to quickly repair damage to the soul in this world, it's with you. Suddenly remembering something, Isra suddenly became nervous. She hurriedly waved her hands. No, I'm not trying to threaten you. I just want to do it. As for seeking treatment, the Dragon Slumber Church and I both have a lot of savings. We are willing. Duque laughed and hugged Isra, who was a little incoherent because of nervousness. He took a deep breath and said, "Silly. You're already my dragon. How can I leave you alone?" Duque had tried to replenish his own soul power many times. It was Duque's first time replenishing another being, a demigod at that. This was not an easy task. Duque asked the system elf, and the answer he got was that if Duque could collect a large number of female dragons, preferably green dragon soul fragments, as raw materials, and purify them, he could theoretically transfer them to Isra. In the following days, Duque went to the Emerald Dream many times, looking for dragon soul matter like picking up trash. Isra's dragon soul was damaged by 36%, which was quite an exaggerated ratio. Under normal circumstances, most beings would become crazy or something. Duque spent a week to barely gather all the materials he needed. When Isra opened her mind and let Duque enter her soul to search her memories and compare her soul matter. After another 3 days of preparation, Duque finally succeeded in repairing Isra's soul. The treatment was quite successful, but not 100%, because a certain bastard's hand trembled and accidentally spilled 30 g of third-grade porn into Isra's soul. Fortunately, it was just a cosplay series. Then that night, Duque saw Isra dressed as a nurse. What was even more ridiculous was that Onyxia actually took advantage of the fact that the battle above had slowed down to sneak back and put on a battle of the two dragons. What battle? It was the blade of Duque's godly sword. If it wasn't for the flames of war raging outside, Duque, this unambitious and unprincipled bastard, would probably be hiding in Karazhan and not coming out. The other heroes couldn't even get a powerful mount if they wanted it. Look at Kudrin Wildhammer next door. He had been showing off for decades with a Griffin King. Duque, on the other hand, didn't even look at the leader's standard pure-blooded Fire Eagle, because his mount was first the Black Dragon Princess, then the King of Dreams. One person occupied 2 of the 5 dragon aspects. Duque was definitely the only one in the world. Duque played dragon taming every day, and there was a big reason. I'm healing the dragon aspect Isra, otherwise Azeroth's anti-Titan array will collapse. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.